Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy was kidnapped child of Big Mom and trained with Garp to learn all 3 Haki? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Psychotic-Tomato for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Summary. The Big Mom pirates are watching the broadcast of the live execution of Fire Fist Ace, although they are a bit sad. After all, it is the day where their brother was taken from them and couldn't find him until now. List of Charlottes in this chapter because there's a lot of them. Katakuri, Brûlé, Perispero, Smoothie, Effler Oven, Amand, Poire, Galette, Bastard, Praline. Update. I just remembered about the fact that all her children were there, so Praline was there. How did they put her in the throne room when she is a mermaid? They just put her in a giant fishbowl. Chapter, updated on just adding more text and fixing any spelling mistakes. New World, Totto Land. Totto Land, an area around the New World that consists of several islands surrounding the main island where a giant woman with a sweet tooth resides. Every island's architecture and constructs are notable for their unusualness. Balls made of biscuits, rooftops that looks like an ice cream dropped on the floor or cake frosting. But not only was the architecture unusual, the entire residents and inhabitants of the islands were also quite unusual. Talking flowers, rocks, mountains, doors, almost every inanimate object seemingly having a sentient existence as if they were alive, as if they had a soul inside of them. Well, the residents come in all shapes and sizes with different and distinct features, be it longer arms, legs and ears, an extra limb or even animalistic features. The most notable island would be the main island, which seemingly looks like it consists of multiple large cakes, with the centerpiece, the castle, resembling cakes that are stacked on top of one another. Whole Cake Island. The main island where a fearsome Yonko resides, there had been several attacks made, but none had succeeded, be it marines, criminals or any other hostile threats that dare bring harm towards the people. None had truly come close, some not even stepping foot on land, and are now sleeping with the fishes and sea kings below. Inside the giant cake castle of Whole Cake Island, in the living room surrounded by almost all of her spawns, sat a giant woman on a big sofa that commandantes her stature. She dons a pink dress with dark blue high heels, her hand had a ring around each fingers, a miniature and cartoonish version of the sun, and a cartoonish cloud loomed above her with eyes looking around, waiting for the viewing. She was known as one of the 4 emperors of the sea. A natural-born monster from birth with a gluttonous appetite. Shunned from her kingdom and later shunned from Elbaf, both related to her destructive nature. The woman who only trusts her 66 children and keeps a gun on the back of the heads of her own allies if they dare betray or lie to her. Charlotte Linlin. But also, rather known as Big Mom, captain of the Big Mom pirates. She was the queen of Totto Land, her ambition being to form a country where all beings of different races or traits that make them stand out is gathered here to live in unity and to coexist, though her dream was incomplete as there are a few races missing from her grasp, such as giants, sky people, Kanakabito and a near-extinct race, Lunarians. Although due to an event that happened years ago, she didn't focus on her dream, but rather on her children instead, making sure to take care of them and be there for them. She vowed to become a better mother to them all after what had happened to one of them. In addition, towards her change, she has slimmed down by a considerable amount. She looked the same as she did when she was around years old, that was thanks to her devil fruit which kept her in good health and seemed to have kept her to look the same throughout decades. By stealing the souls of others, she could maintain her lifespan and youth as long as she has enough souls, a cruel and crude but still functional way to achieve eternal youth. Although a major factor would have to be that accident. It was hard for her to enjoy food after what her husband did, a woman who regularly went through plates among plates containing food that stacked on top of each other, that they reached roughly half her height, was reduced to struggling to finish a whole cake. In her throne room where almost all of her children gathered around for Praline, who was a mermaid, they put her in a giant fish bowl and was carted inside the room, the current absent siblings being Katakuri and Brûlé. It was a rare occasion due to the fact that most of her children were out doing tasks as their minister, or simply had issues like a pirate or marine attack, which would delay them and make them miss the gathering. But on this day all of the children were gathered here for the biggest event that is about to unfold. The execution of ND Division Commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, Fire Fist Ace. They had also sent some spies to capture any important conversation that couldn't be heard from the live stream, either disguised as a marine or an ally of Whitebeard. Where are Katakuri and Brûlé? Big Mom asked her children that were with her in a soft voice. Her eldest child, Perispero, decided to respond. They should be coming here anytime now, Mama Peroine, said Perispero, informing their mother also with a similar soft tone. And as he said that, Katakuri and Broly came walking through the doors, although Broly's eyes were pretty red with a grim look adorning her face, while Katakuri also had a sorrowful and grim look on his face, but it seemed the gloominess around him was heavier. Katakuri gave Broly a pat on the back as they settled down with the rest of them, although the rest of the older siblings had similar looks of guilt and sorrow in their faces. It was the same day in which it all happened. Broly had been there when it happened. She screamed and tried to do something, but before she could, she was knocked out. She had failed, they all had failed to stop that man from taking him away from them. Some of the younger ones were confused, but the ones who heard about what had happened that day had a look of sympathy for their older siblings and were touching, holding, hugging them in a way to support them, but out of all of them their mother seemed to look the worst. Her hair wasn't fixed or taken care of in any way, a concerning contrast to the woman who would spend hours to comb and tidy her hair and always had a depressing and grim look on her face. Her red eyes looked like that of a dead fish, her oranger eyes were darker than usual, with the light in her eyes dimming, slowly fading out, as if losing something. It had happened 1.5 decades ago, but no matter what, she couldn't stop the nightmares that plagued her that day. It not only woke her up to the reality of how she treated her family, but just further drove her to become more protective and caring for her children. It was the first time it had happened to her, and she damn well isn't going to let it happen twice, nor was she going to go back to how she used to be, never again. She was going to be better for their sake. The broadcast will be starting soon, said Tamago, looking at his pocket watch before turning and looking sympathetic for the family. He had served them for a long time, and when he heard what happened, he immediately sent out search parties to see if the man was still hiding on the island and sent several patrol ships to find a boat when she ordered him to. But they couldn't. They looked for him on every island in their territory, many islands outside of their territories, and not under their thumbs were held captive just so they could search for him, but that still wasn't enough. They had done it and pulled off a stunt similar to what Roger did to her, but this wasn't just a cut to her pride this time around. No, it couldn't be just that. It just had to be a direct jab to her heart, along with a fragment of it being stolen from her. Dragon had taken away her baby. On the screen now displayed Ace kneeling cuffed with sea stone while the fleet admiral, Sengoku, looming over him with a den mushi in hand with a sense of duty on his face, as if this moment of his life was of the utmost importance and must go off without a hitch whatsoever. Edward's brat was harder to read as he was facing down the scaffold on the wooden deck where he kneeled down, keeping a neutral expression on his face. Ace, tell me the name of your father. My father is Whitebeard. Wrong. It is my father is Whitebeard, I have no other father. The Charlottes were intrigued right now, some even had their backs straightened with others leaning forward in curiosity. Why did Fire Fist Ace's father matter? Was his father someone infamous who had a big name? Yes. Yes, his father had a big name indeed. Your mother's name is Portes de Rouge, she used all of her strength and as soon as she gave birth to you she died. I'm sure you already know who your father is. The Pirate King, Gold Roger. Silence. That was the only thing they could maintain and do for a couple of seconds, maybe even a minute. They were stunned and shocked by this revelation that Roger had a son, Ing's son this entire time. It was silent until Leffily, her daughter, spoke up as her jaw hanged low from surprise. Fire Fist Ace is Gold Roger's son. And it was just pure chaos after that. That guy had a child. So, Fire Fist got his strength from his father. Is he after the One Piece as well? How did no one found out till now? Were some of things the Charlottes were saying when they recovered from their shock, although some of them were still clearly taking the information that was dumped on them, until Big Mom made a comment herself. Her delivery would have been full of amusement and mockery for how she despised Roger for what he did and how his son would be joining him soon, but yet she just couldn't. Her tone sounded like she was reading a newspaper and found something that somewhat piqued her interest. So Roger had a brat this entire time, not only that, but he joined Whitebeard's crew, how ironic. And the ones who heard her couldn't help but agree and be amused at that. It was true, the son of Roger sailing under Whitebeard, a person considered to be the rival of Roger's, what a joke. Roger must be crying in his grave finding out that his own son considered Whitebeard to be his one true dad rather than him. Although the more observant ones took a glance at their mother, she would sinisterly give a twisted grin, while sounding like she was amused and was openly mocking the sight with the revelation, but yet she just had a neutral look on her face, only raising eyebrows at the reveal, before going back to a look of boredom. They weren't used to this side of their mama yet. And it had been almost decades since the accident. Now with the information presented to them they were looking forward to seeing what comes next. After all, Whitebeard wouldn't let it slide that the Marines were trying to execute one of his sons even with a lineage. He might have even known about it when he joined. The Marines better be prepared. She knew that even though Whitebeard was growing old, he is still a pretty damn strong pirate that had enough power to destroy the damn place if he wishes to. She would know after sailing with him under rocks before his death. The only thing stopping him is the fact he would take out his son in doing so. A couple minutes later. And lo and behold, Whitebeard's ship came out of nowhere from below the ocean, springing out, and later on 3 more ships appearing. It seemed that all commanders under Whitebeard were there to rescue Ace, which wasn't surprising. They would go hell to and back for their commander. Later on. It was one hell of a fight. The Whitebeard pirates came rushing to fight the Marines to save their brother. Big Mom was interested in the strange giant with horns, fangs and yellow-green skin. He was definitely an abnormal giant of some kind, like her, although she was later saddened by the fact he seemed to have died. He seemed to be reaching out towards Ace, as if they were long-time friends, which could possibly be likely. Only for him to limp dead as an explosion abrupted on him, and he laid limped. The Ice Witch, Whitey Bay, made an appearance with her icebreaker ship that broke through a part of the wall, which in turn made the pirates go through the opening made by her. Things were turning out interestingly until. I knew you'd overdo it. That's because of his wink. If I were blaming this on me, Croco. Who cares, we're gonna die. Oh, I'm made of rubber, so I'll be fine. Several black humanoid silhouettes had came falling from the sky, but the one falling faster from the rest of them had come into view with colors fading in. No longer was he just a mere shadow, but now what seemed to be a young child with a straw hat dangling off on his back. And the Charlottes recognized his face via the wanted poster when he got their attention for what he and his crew unknowingly did for them. Isn't that Smoothie trailed off, looking towards her siblings while twirling around her wine glass which held juice in it. Straw Hat Luffy, some of her siblings said, nodding towards her while she made a smaller nod of acknowledgement at that. They had heard about the boy from Lola, their sister, who went out to sail to find love after turning down Loki and their mama, also turning him down, because if my own child rejects you, then it's not meant to be. After that, she had gone up to their mother and told her she wanted to set sail. The siblings that were present held their breath and looked at their mother to see if she would get angry, as she had been looking forward to getting a giant to be friends and allies with since she had founded Totto Land, but instead rejected that offer by turning down the marriage, as Lola held no love interest towards him. Thinking that Lola had been asking for too much after the whole ordeal, their mother, instead of narrowing her eyes and berating her while swinging her fist down onto her for acting like a spoiled brat like they were used to, gave a soft look towards Lola and told her to take care of herself and ordered to prepare a ship for Lola, which she beamed at. They were surprised by the turn of events, but were smiling and happy for her and for their mom. Their mother was changing for the better. Although it would be immediately replaced with guilt and sorrow, remembering who made her better and the fact that they couldn't find him, it frustrated them. And the one responsible for making her better was stolen from them. She would call them regularly on the snail to tell them what she's doing or her progress on trying to find love. When she got rejected a couple of times, the siblings would laugh but encourage her that she would eventually find true love. When the number of rejections reached digits, they were amused and teased their sister about it. When it reached digits, they sweat dropped and felt a bit bad for her. They did tease her about it, but it didn't have the same strength as the previous teasings. But when it reached digits, they felt nothing but sympathy for her, some even letting out a tear out of pity, some even defying logic by taking out a flask of alcohol from out of nowhere to drink at the new. They were mourning as if a family pet had died. Well, most of them. The younger ones, they couldn't help but laugh at their sister's misfortune. Lola would curse her younger siblings whenever they did and told them to wait till they get rejected when they grow up and confess to someone. But when Lola stopped calling altogether for some reason, they were worried until she called back. Turned out she was stuck on Thriller Bark until a group of pirates saved her. Most of their siblings, mostly the older ones and the ones close to Lola, were there when Big Mom told Lola had rung. They had talked about how she got stuck there until Big Mom asked who saved her precious love-seeking daughter. Flashback to the aftermath of Moria's defeat. Sorry mama, I was careless. It's fine sweetheart, now tell mama who were the ones who saved you. Ah, they are the Straw Hat. Big Mom has heard about them, a rookie crew coming from the eastern seas, the weakest sea, had been appearing on the newspaper lately due to their actions like storming Eni's lobby and even punching a celestial dragon, which takes a lot of guts, which was a surprise to her, although she never really cared about them, except for some of her children. So what if they were some rookie crew coming in strong from the east? The New World pirate considered people like them a small fish in a vast ocean. What's the name of their captain? Having said all that, she was interested on who their captain was along with her children. For him to defeat Gecko Moria was an impressive feat. After all, he was the one who fought that brat of a kid Kaido. Seriously, she had saved him by shoving a devil fruit down his mouth when their captain went fully batshit insane and ordered them to go to God Valley, causing the biggest shitstorm crashing down upon them, and they survived with their captain dead. And what did he do when she saved his ass from near death? He just disappeared and left her. That brat owes her a pretty big debt for what she had done for him. He was defeated but still went toe-to-toe with him. After the fight with Moria's crew dead, he slacked off and used his devil fruit way more often rather than training his Haki and other skills, but even still he was pretty strong even after all this time slacking around, so for him to be beaten by some rookie Pirates, this piqued her interest. His name is Luffy. Big Mom froze at that name Luffy. "M-A-M-A-M-A-M-A it is D-O-N-E," Big Mom said, sounding satisfied while rubbing her belly, finally feeling another soul register in her womb with her devil fruit. She then looked up and grinned sinisterly at her husband, although her eyes for this man was mixed with curiosity unlike her other husbands. He had quite the resigned look on his face. Most of her husbands would look grim, some shaking and clenching their fist in frustration, as they had no choice but to submit their spawns to her, no able to be there for their children, but Dragon. No, he just had a look of acceptance. She couldn't feel nor sense any negative feelings nor positive. He was neutral. He was a weirdo, maybe it had to do with the fact he bears D in his name. She shrugged though, another child will be born under her thumb along with the rest and ultimately become another stepping stone for her dream, and her newborn child will be a stepping stone when he finally comes to this world. Children must do what mama tells them to do. Children must always listen to their mama and obey, their happiness is her happiness, so they must please and keep their mama happy. That is what Mother Caramel taught her after ALL. She leaned forward, maintaining her cruel Cheshire-like grin on her face, while staring down at the little revolutionary in front of her as two night soldier homies approach from behind. "You know what this means, right?" she says mockingly, trying to get a reaction out of him, but he just stoically nods. She couldn't help but drop her grin at that. She just stares at the man before he turns around and leaves, no hesitation, no regret, just nothing. Although, when he got to the doorframe. "Luffy?" Big Mom raised an eyebrow at Dragon, who only now has spoken since he entered and was currently leaving the place. "Huh. Luffy, that's his name," Dragon said before he finally upped and left while she stared at the doorway for a couple of seconds before she scoffed. He had no rights to name her spawn, only she will and ultimately decide their names, their roles and fate. Although she will take it into consideration, he had after all left without throwing a fit or give any problems and was the only one suggested a name for one of her spawns. Luffy, Luffy. Charlotte Luffy. It has a nice ring to it. "Mama, what's wrong?" Humpet, her eldest daughter, broke her out of her trance. The Charlottes were worried when she suddenly became silent and was muttering Luffy underneath her breath while staring off into space. "Mama," this time Perospero asked with a look of worry until Big Mom said something. "I was planning to name him after my cravings. When he was born the siblings understood that, after all, she named her children after what she was craving for during her pregnancy, which lead to names like Smoothie, Cracker, Pudding and so on. But that man, the name that he suggested for him." They winced and subconsciously clenched their fist when they heard him being mentioned, reminiscing about the accident again. Was Luffy. Now they understood why she was feeling shocked, a pirate whose name was the same one that could have been their brother's. Although they wondered. Could it be him? Could it be the one who they were looking for? If so, how the hell did Dragon move from New World to somewhere around Paradise on that night? There was no way he could have sailed off on a ketch, much less on a sloop too. They would have spotted such a ship with ease, even with how puny and tiny it is. If he wanted to sail off, they must have gotten on a really, really small ship, like a rowboat. But with the unpredictable weather and nature of the New World. Considering the revolutionary is up and running still without pause, there was no way they could have died out at sea, which was a huge relief. They did not want to come to the worst conclusions. They will continue raking in ideas and any possible leads to their missing brother's whereabouts. But for now, they went to their mother to comfort her, something they wouldn't dare to do years ago, but after her change, they didn't even hesitate anymore. Flashback end. Ace Luffy shouted upon landing on the ground of Marineford. "Garp, it's your family again," shouted Sengoku to his closest friend. Seriously, what was up with his damn family? Luffy, Garp shouted loudly in irritation while pulling his hair. The Charlottes were interested in this turn of events as it turns out that he has came with several prisoners and some pretty strong pirates like Crocodile, Jinbei, Ivankov and Buggy. When Crocodile went to strike Whitebeard, they saw Luffy went to intercept him, and Whitebeard seemed to have a conversation with Luffy, their inside man transmitting their conversation by sneaking below the ship. "Have you come here to save your brother?" "That's right. Do you understand who you are up against? Someone like you doesn't stand a chance here." "Shut up, that's not for you to decide. I know perfectly well. You want to be the king of the pirates, don't you? I am the man who will become the pirate king." "Kid's got balls," Oven said with a smirk, and the rest of the family agreed with him, for a rookie like himself to stand up against Whitebeard. Now that takes a lot of guts. But for him to openly shout out in front of him that he will become the pirate king after Roger. Now that's asking for a death wish. After that, Whitebeard laughed at the kid's claim of being the next pirate king, and Luffy charged head on to save Ace, taking out a bunch of marines on his way until Ace told Luffy to back off. Linlin wondered if Edward would make him one of his sons if they all survived this war. "I am your brother." "Those stupid pirate rules, I've never heard of them." The Charlottes can't help but smile at this. After all, they would get frequent attacks from Marines, pirates and criminals alike. Sometimes they even went so far to attempt to steal the younger ones, but they had always been there to protect each other no matter what. One time, Amand had been walking with Poir and Galette, and when Amand let Poir out of her sight for a few seconds she was gone. She heard a scream coming from an alley and saw some Marines that were undercover, saying they would kill her in the name of justice and how she should have never been born and she was a freak because of her teeth. Amand, upon hearing and seeing this, went and dealt with them. Their deaths were gruesome. Amand made sure of that. She wasn't one to take her siblings being bullied very well. She earned the title Demon Lady that day. Later on, when Big Mom heard about it, she cuddled and hugged Poir close, reassuring her that there was nothing wrong with her looks. That night Mama had slept with Poir, Galette and Amand, while her other children just invited themselves in after hearing what happened, and they had a massive sleepover. Thankfully Poir recovered mentally and was smiling happily, but she seemed insecure when outside the streets and sometimes covered her teeth or closed her mouth shut, which sometimes hurts the Charlottes inside, especially Katakuri and Bhaskar. They could relate, seeing how she became somewhat afraid of being judged for her teeth by the people. It's only one rookie, don't let him dictate the entire war this way. He was raised with Ace as his stepbrother. But his actual bloodline makes him the son of the revolutionary dragon. They all froze at this. Summary. The Charlottes discuss the matter of what they have heard, and some memories are revealed on why Big Mom had decided to change for the better. List of Charlottes in this chapter because there's a lot of them. Dolce, Dreji, Brulé, Broye, Katakuri, Normand, Smoothie, Ewan, Perispero, Compet, Amand, Defuki, Flamp, Pudding. Previously. It's only one rookie, don't let him dictate the entire war this way. He was raised with Ace as his stepbrother. But his actual bloodline makes him the son of the revolutionary dragon. They all froze at this. Present. Chapter, updated on rewriting some stuff and all. Tamago, throughout his years of service with the Charlottes, was shocked when Big Mom and her older children aged and up, seemed to be frozen upon hearing about the boy's father. Their faces were pale and white before some of their expressions softened, and for some, their eyes were either watery or shiny and had brought their hands onto their mouths over this revelation. Big Mom in particular was frozen in place before her eyes moved around the room, seeing her children's expressions. She didn't misheard it at all. It was him, it was really him. The children who didn't know about who Dragon were confused and shocked when they saw their older siblings and their mother acting so weird about the revelation before. Dragon. Dolce said, tilting his head towards his elder siblings. He and his brother had heard about that man from listening in on one of his siblings' conversations. By being above them with their balloons, they always had looks of frustration, grief and guilt whenever they talk about something. Wasn't that guy Dreji trailed off. The bastard who stole our brother Brulé scowled heavily while subconsciously using her devil fruit and causing all the mirrors in the room to shake. That was one of her biggest failures that had weighed heavily upon her shoulders throughout her life. She couldn't stop the one responsible from taking away their baby brother who upon seeing their mother smiled brightly like the sun and beamed at her, their baby brother who single-handedly changed their mother for the better, their baby brother who upon seeing her didn't cry like how her siblings did when they saw her when they were babies, but instead smiled at her, their baby bro, who was stolen by that son of a bitch dragon. Broye and Katakuri immediately went to comfort her, although they had a dark look on their face being reminded of that man who had stolen the one who made Mama better and made Brulé feel somewhat better about the scar. Although all of the older siblings had similar looks of hatred and anger when Brulé spoke of him. If they get their hands on him. Stole her brother. Normand, the daughter, one of the youngest, asked. She didn't know about the fact that she had another older brother but was stolen from birth. Have you ever wondered why sometimes we said Ewan was one of two and he could have had a twin? Smoothie said. She remembered that moment. She was around 6 years old at that time, but she was there when it happened. She was one of the older ones who were part of the search parties, while the younger ones stayed. They looked everywhere for him. The memories burned fresh, seeing the man wearing a cloak with a visible red tattoo going over his eye with their brother in hand. That night none of the younger siblings could sleep as they were worried about what has happened to the newborn, while the older siblings had been looking throughout the entire damn place, island and around the sea. Many islands had been flipped upside down and burned to the ground, all to find him. The younger ones, especially Ewan himself, was interested in this. They had always heard how some of their older siblings sadly talked about how there was supposed to be another child besides Ewan. They wanted to ask, but they didn't seem to want to talk about it. When they asked Mama, she would twitch or even flinch at the mention of this and said she would explain when they were older. Big Mom with a deep breath to compose herself after hearing the information, although she wanted to let tears out in relief. Years of not knowing whether her baby boy was dead or alive until he was there at Marineford where Sengoku revealed his biological father. She looked at her children and explained. Monkey D. Dragon. years ago, gave me a child. During that time I was already pregnant with Ewan, his birth being just a few months away from him, so in a way they were sort of twins. Big Mom gripped her hand tightly, her nails digging into her palm, causing her to bleed a bit. She was reminiscing about that day. Upon her children seeing this, the ones closest to her held her arm in a supporting manner and gave her worried and reassuring looks which she was mentally thanking them for. Even her 3 homies made from her soul was shooting a concerned look over her when she talked about him. After all, Zeus, Napoleon and Prometheus were there when Big Mom cried and wailed for her baby on that day. They tried to comfort her in any way in which they could, which she was grateful for. She took a deep breath and had a soft but a regretful and guilty look in her eyes before continuing on. During that time before Luffy was born I was not exactly the best mother. She looked away from them in shame and guilt but could feel how her children's arms and hands held hers tighter, remembering on how she neglected her children's problem when she should have been paying more attention. She could feel Mother Caramel shoot a look of disappointment towards Linlin if she was still around. After all, her dream was to make a land where all races can be together and live in peace and happily. How could she achieve that when she couldn't even make her own children happy? How could she have not seen her children's problem and insecurities? But when Luffy was born he did something that had me thinking very deeply about. She looked back towards her children, but more focused on the ones who were there when she had given birth to Luffy. They were looking towards each other at first, before looking back at their mother in curiosity. They had always wondered what Mama thought about during her time with their newborn brother and what the baby did to move her so emotionally. The younger ones were more intrigued over the story and were leaning forward to hear what happened on that day. He looked at me, gave me his biggest grin, and laughed. Big Mom trailed off her gaze far away, remembering that moment when her Luffy had given him such an innocent and bright look that had changed her. It felt as if I was holding the sun in my hands. It was purely warm and comfort. Big Mom finished off with a soft but sad smile. When I looked at him, I remembered about Mother Caramel and how she took care of me and the other orphans. Then I started remembering about how I had my own adorable, cute and innocent children. Big Mom softly chuckled when she saw the older ones had a look of embarrassment, their grip on her faltering, but they composed themselves a few seconds later, but were still blushing on what she said, although they were internally happy about this. The younger ones just snickering and giggling at their older siblings, in which they responded with a stink eye. Then I remembered about how I treated you all. When she said that, her arm was shaking a bit from having a flashback towards how she acted towards her children, how cold and cruel she was. When Broly had gotten a scar, she waved it off as some fight between bigger kids. When Katakuri covered his face, she had encouraged it rather than reassuring he looked fine with his teeth. Sometimes she would even insult them on how they look. She was in a trance until she felt how her children held until her more firmly, giving her a look of worry. She calmed down before continuing. Then I realize what I have done to you all. She said shakily, her eyes starting to become watery as she looked at the ones she were talking about, and they shot back a look of forgiveness, and in turn, she lifted her arms, slowly making the ones holding onto her to let go, and she brought them close to hug them. She was quietly whispering to all her children, but they could hear her mutter soft words of apologies and how much she loved them. They could hear their older siblings responding with "It's fine, and you have become betters" and other positive comments which she started to smile softly at. After a moment of silence, she continued. And that's when I noticed all of you peeking. She chuckled softly at that, the ones who had been there also softly chuckling and giggling at the memory. And that was the day when it happened. Big Mom said solemnly with a grim face that was mimicked by everyone who was also there. The worst event that happened in their lives. Flashback years ago, Luffy's birth. Big Mom's pav. What have I done? I muttered softly while letting out a single tear. I couldn't help but feel like utter shit after realizing what I have done to my own children. I couldn't hold it in and started to sob quietly. The way he smiled hit me with a sense of nostalgia. I remembered all the good times I had at the orphanage and how I wanted to make an island with people from different races or had traits that made them stand out. I wanted people like them to live together in peace without discrimination or harm. How could I achieve that when I couldn't even do that with my own children? Mother Caramel wouldn't do this. Creak. I looked towards the door and saw my children peeking, probably to see who their brother was. What caught my eyes and my heart were how they looked at me. They looked afraid, tense and scared. I noticed how they were staring at me as if I was gonna murder them. I couldn't help but felt something stuck in my throat. I was disgusted with myself. My own children fear me and see me as nothing more as a monster rather than a mother. What have I become? When I raised my hand to wave them over, Katakuri, Perispero and Compet had immediately gone in front and was standing in a way that looked like they were protecting the others who looked worried and afraid for their elder brothers and sister who covered them. How far had I fallen till the point they had to be on guard all the time from their own mother? I signaled them in a way to come closer and saw they were hesitant at first to come near me, but they did it slowly, and each step they took I could hear some of them taking deep breaths and were shaking and trembling a bit until they came up to my foot. I really messed it up, didn't I? But even so I can't just drown in my guilt. No, that wouldn't change anything. I will become a better mother for them. After thinking about my new goal, I looked at my children and smiled softly at them, like when I first had Sparrow, when I had Compet, when I first had my triplets, when I had my snake quadruplets. When I was better than this. I lowered my arm to show them their new baby brother. Bruley hesitantly, but slowly approached him to get a closer look, and when they made eye contact, he laughed and beamed at Bruley. She was stunned, but that quickly shifted to sobs, but she had a smile on her face, which I can't help but make me smile wider at. Most of my children when they were babies and saw Bruley they would cry, it had saddened Bruley, and normally when the younger children grew up, they hadn't met Bruley until later on because they were afraid of her appearance, but their newborn brother wasn't bothered by her and seemed to take joy in her presence. I noticed my older children were worried when she started to cry, but when they saw her crying in joy, they smiled warmly at this, knowing how their younger children were afraid of her when they were still toddlers. When they turned to look at their baby brother, he also beamed at them in happiness which they smiled warmly at. It felt nice. Bruley wiped her tears and looked at me and asked. "What's his name?" I put him back in his crib and rubbed my chin and thought. Honestly, I haven't figured it out yet. I didn't mention the fact that Dragon asked me to name our child Luffy, but with the things that were happening, I just put that thought away. I looked towards my children. Gather all of the family into my bedroom. I need to talk with you all about something. They gulped and seemed to have swallowed a lump in their throat before Katakuri and Sparrow responded, "Why yes mama," and they left to gather their siblings. I took a glance at the baby. He looked at me with worry before I smiled at him and he smiled back. I chuckled softly. Honestly, he truly is beyond precious. Thank you for opening my eyes. For being a light in the darkness. I left the room and went towards the throne room to talk to them. In Big Mom's bedroom. Big Mom opened the bedroom door and saw all her children gathered around in a circle, and any small talk they were having were immediately cut off when they noticed their mother's presence. They were tense and worried if their mom was going to punish them or hit them for making a mistake or any other punishment if they did something that displeased her. Expecting a look that promised pain and fury, they saw her looking at them with an unreadable expression. She walked closer towards them before she started looming above them, the Charlottes holding onto each other preparing for the worst. They were unexpectedly swooped up from the ground and she held them close to her chest. They were too stunned to speak. She went and got onto her bed before putting all her children onto her lap. The Charlotte saw how she was biting her lips before something hit them. They were soaked in water, but it was salty. The Charlottes hesitantly looked up and saw something that shocked them. Tears could be seen in her eyes. Their mother was crying and she looked like she was trying to say something, but every time she did, she would bite her lips and sob harder until it went from whimpering to quiet sobbing. They couldn't move, they couldn't speak or do anything. How could they? They never saw their mother like this. They were stuck like this for a full minute before stopped crying and was now whimpering. Amanda, hesitant at first to speak for a few seconds, called out to her. Mama. I'm sorry. They heard someone mutter, but it sounded like their mother, but she wouldn't say something like that, but looking around they knew even though it was hard to comprehend, their mother was apologizing. When Amanda heard this, she was a bit confused and shocked. I'm sorry. This time they saw their mother actually said it. They were again left speechless at this. Their mother who acted so cold and so mean to them was apologizing. This was the first time they saw her in such a state. Sorry for what, Mama? Amanda questioned, again confused. Why would she apologize? Normally they were the ones apologizing when they did something bad. I'm sorry for what I have done to you. I'm sorry I couldn't have been better to all of you. I am sorry. They couldn't believe it. Their mother was crying and apologizing. They looked at each other with hopeful eyes. Could their mother actually be changing for the better? If so, then why? Although they were panicking trying to calm down, this wasn't like her hunger pangs or burst of anger and rage. They weren't prepared to deal with something like this, so they could only hold onto their mother's hands as a way of support until she calmed down. And when she did, she looked at them with conviction. I swear that I will do better from now on, not for my own sake, but for your own. Big Mom said softly but yet sounded and looked determined, but they could also see a soft maternal look in her eyes before she continued. All of you are precious to me, none of you can be replaced. The Charlottes blushes in embarrassment at this, even if it was such an emotional moment, they can't help but be embarrassed, but they were happy and some even smiling. Mama, what made you want to change? Ifuku asked in curiosity. He hadn't seen their mother like this since him and his brothers were born, and judging by his brothers and younger siblings' looks, they too were curious what brought upon the change. Your newborn brother had me thinking is gonna grow up to be someone kind-hearted and has a smile that can challenge the sun. Their mother said, and they had to agree. It felt warm and nice when they saw his smile. The Charlottes vowed to make his life enjoyable and memorable when his growing up with them, they owed him a debt after all, he sure was something else, to change their mother with just a smile. They can't wait to watch him grow up. The next moments they decided to have some nice family talk until they heard crying coming from the nursery, must have either been Ewan or their newborn brother. Burlee went to check up and see if what was wrong, they continued their conversation until they heard a scream coming from the nursery. Surprised and tensed, the Charlottes immediately went to the nursery, Katakuri being further ahead of them and had a worried look in his eyes, although his facial expression was somewhat covered up with his scarf, Broya was right behind him, also very worried about her twin. He was the first to get there, and he looked stunned and was still, the rest of the siblings, and eventually their mother caught up to him and saw a sight that froze their blood. There lying on the floor was Burlee knocked out unconscious while a man was standing on the window with Ewan crying in his crib, but what caught their attention and made them freeze up was what he was holding. He had their baby brother in his hand. Before they could do anything, thunder struck and they caught a glimpse of the man, and they instantly knew, after all it was his most distinct feature, the tribal marking on his face, and after that. Nothing. He had disappeared, along with their brother. Quickly gather a search party, get every available ships out to sea, find that bastard, find Dragon, get him back. Their mother immediately snapped out of it and ordered, without asking any questions they immediately followed orders, while the younger ones also were tempted to go, but were told to stay put due to not being trained yet. They can't let him get away, they mustn't let him disappear, they vowed to be there for him, they can't let him be separated from them. But Atlas, after several hours of searching through every island near Totto land and around the sea, with Montdor commanding and instructing them, they came back, the younger ones with their mother with them were impatient, trying to prepare for the worst news, but nothing could. Then the doors opened. The older siblings slowly approached them with an unreadable expression on their face before Katakuri, Burlee, Perispero, Compet, and Smoothie approached them. Smoothie let out a few tears followed by her older siblings before it turned into sobbing. The servants with them had grim looks in their face, and they knew. They had lost their brother, Dragon had gotten away. That day was the day all the Charlottes with their mother hugging them cried for hours, days, and weeks without end. Flashback end. The younger ones had tears in their eyes, they couldn't believe something like that happened, but before they could respond, Compet, wide-eyed staring at the screen after compassing herself, said one thing that got all their attention, and they paled when they saw what had her attention on the screen. Luffy. He was facing all three admirals, alone. At Marineford. Quite an entrance, son of Dragon. This youngster sure is scary. If nothing else, I praise your tenacity. But you're not ready for this stage yet. Evase back, Luffy shouted at the admirals. Kizaru had flashed in front of Luffy when he went past them, Kizaru was preparing to kick him. But Luffy did something they did not expect. Get out of my way. Luffy shouted with a blackened fist, sending Kizaru plummeting into the ground and knocking him out, he was too surprised to defend himself. Use a Shoku Haki. The Kainu and Aokiji were stunned, he knew how to use armament Haki, a Haki user from East Blue, the weakest sea Sengoku, upon seeing this ordered the executioner to execute Ace. Luffy screamed for Ace, but just as they were about to, sand had hit them, Crocodile had intervened. Luffy took this chance to run towards Ace, but was intercepted by Aokiji throwing an icicle at him, luckily it only threw him back a bit, thank God he learned about armament Haki from Shanks. Oars brought the Moby into the wall, and the Whitebeard pirates had flooded in, but Luffy didn't care about that, he had to save Ace. With the help of the Vankov clearing the way, he had to face Kobe, who he quickly dealt with, until they raised the blades upon Ace. Luffy, upon seeing this, decided to say one simple thing that knocked out a few of the pirates and half of the marines. Stop. Upon saying that, the executioners, marines and pirates went unconscious, the ones who were conscious were surprised, Ace's brother had just used Conqueror's Haki like he did, although Ace was smiling a bit, after all. He was taught by Luffy about Haki, thanks to him being taught by Shanks. Sengoku saw this and raised an eyebrow. What are you smiling about? Ace responded, looking back at him with a smirk. Oh, nothing, it's just that my younger brother is a lot stronger than you think, and he isn't happy about what you guys did to me, you are beyond screwed. Which had Sengoku eyes narrowed, stronger than him. Ace was the ND commander of Whitebeard, which meant he was pretty damn strong, but his little brother was stronger than him. Little did Sengoku know that Luffy, due to Garp's insane training with Shanks' guidance, he was gonna be the biggest obstacle, ND to Whitebeard. The Totto land. The family were stunned at first, but they cheered for what their brother did, he had punched an admiral, and he used Conqueror's Haki. Besides their mom, Katakuri was the only one who had it, but just as the executioners were about to kill Ace, which had them tensed and sweating, they didn't want Luffy to lose a person he considered a brother. Worry turned into shock when Luffy shouted, and the marines fell and went unconscious. He has Conqueror's Haki like Katakuri, Naif Lamp shouted surprised, putting next to her, had all three eyes wide at his display of Haki. The Charlottes now leaned forward and focusing on what their brother would do, they also asked Tamago to order the chefs to prepare beverages, sweets and especially popcorn. This was gonna be one hell of a fight. At Marineford. The Kainu eyes narrowed Conqueror's Haki to think he was born with it, but it's to be expected from the son of evil. Akiji let out a sweat while talking to himself. Oh, are you serious? Zoro had gotten up from the impact and saw what had happened. That surprised me, although he was no longer smiling. All three admirals glanced at each other before rushing to attack Luffy. They couldn't let him get away. He was a D who has Conqueror's Haki and armament also. He was going to be a sure danger in the future. They had to take him out along with Fire Fist Ace before they could grow. Now. Luffy upon seeing this just grinned fiercely with a sinister glint in his eyes. Bring it. Hardening his left hand, he put his mouth onto it and he inflated it. Muscle balloon. And said one thing that had Ace grinning at, he was gonna use it. Dear TH. Chapter. Upon saying this, his body had inflated, symbols appearing and expanding on his chest with smoke blocking his figure until it disappeared and reviewed his new look. Bounce man. The Kainu scoffed. What is this, a joke? Zoro amused but seemed to be on guard. He sure got big. Luffy, I am serious, said Luffy. You can't even stand straight, you're bouncing because you're rubber, Akiji said. Shut up, you guys won't be able to do anything against me, Luffy said, winding up his fist. At Totto land. That's interesting, Smoothie said, crossing her legs and leaned forward in anticipation. What was special about this technique their brother was displaying? It seems to be a combination of armament and his devil fruit cracker, said, interested in his brother's next move. He sure is bouncing a lot, commented Compet with a sweat drop, while her siblings who were around her agreed. He got big, Custard said in surprise. Cracker grinned. Ahahaha, that's what she sighed before he could finish what he was saying. Angel had smacked him in the head. 6. What are those markings though, Poir asked while tilting her head. Tamago, after this war is over, get the information of his devil fruit, Big Mom asked of him, wondering what he could do in such a form. He could inflate and seems to be able to stretch, which hints at a paramecia which is related to rubber. But this form he took on, there was steam around his body that looked akin to robes, his eyes shaded, markings of some sorts on his chest. It seemed like he was a paramecia, but this form looked more like a mythical zone of some kind. Big Mom shrugged of her thoughts. She should be focusing what her son was gonna do right now. The Charlottes now leaned forward and wondering what their brother would do. At Marineford. Luffy was bouncing a few times, winding up his hands, and had a look of concentration, and after a bounce. He went for Akiji. Gomu Gomu no fist cranked up back into his arm. Akiji was surprised but was able to raise his arms to try and defend himself. On gun, he was immediately sent flying and crashed into the headquarters. The people who were watching were stunned, the Marines were terrified, but the pirates cheered on. Bararara, so it is true, Whitebeard laughed out loud. Ace had told Whitebeard about how ridiculously strong Luffy was and how he trained him on how to use Haki. Marco along with his brothers were confused and turned their head towards their father figure. What's true? Whitebeard grinned. Ace had told me about how insanely strong his brother was, he even taught him armament Haki, and when he found out about how Ace had conquerors, he taught him that also. They were stunned. Ace learned from his little brother about Haki, but that would imply. The pops, how old was Luffy when he taught Ace? Oh, he was around 60 years old around that time when he taught him Haki. 6. The commanders, their allies and marines who were near them heard what he said, and they had their jaws dropped at that. First, he was revealed to be the son of Dragon, then it was revealed he could use Haki, especially conquerors, and now he overpowered an admiral with ease with a single punch. But not only that, but he learned Haki at 6, what the is up with that brat? They were afraid to even think about the fact if he had other siblings. He was the brother of Ace. Was there an older brother or sister of his who was also stupidly strong? And they haven't even gotten to his mother, but they didn't want to. It would be too much to handle if it was revealed to be a big shot. At Totto land. The Charlottes were surprised but smiled at what he had done, the younger ones cheering him on. Big Mom was just beaming with pride on how strong her son was. She can't wait to get Luffy back to them. What strength, Fa Opera said with his brothers nodding dumbfounded. They had noticed how their spy had seemed to be pick up whatever Whitebeard and his sons had been talking about. Ace had told me about how insanely strong his brother was, he even taught him armament Haki, and when he found out about how Ace had conquerors, he taught him that also. The pops, how old was Luffy when he taught Ace? Oh, he was around 60 years old around that time when he taught him Haki. The Charlottes who were eating and drinking did a spit taker choked. He was 6, Cracker, Custard and Angel said in unison. Sister Breath, Broya said, patting the back of Burly who choked. She hadn't eaten anything when the revelation came. Everyone had looks of surprise. Sure, Katakuri had conquerors, but he was around or so when he had unlocked it. He sure is something else, ain't he, Smoothie said, smirking proudly of her brother's power. Everyone nodded in agreement at that. At Marineford. Zoro and Akainu had their guard up and were tense. They shouldn't have underestimated this brat. They kept staring at him with their guards up until he disappeared. Gomu Gomu no. Before Akainu could react, he was blasted off. Rhino Schneider Luffy kicked Akainu off into a far distance. Zoro upon seeing this flashed far away to cover distance. The Asakani sacred jewel. The yellow beam had hit and exploded upon impact. When it hit him, there was a lot of smoke created. Sengoku upon seeing this had a poker face, although it seemed he was satisfied about what he saw. Well, Garp gritted his teeth, but Sengoku noticed how Ace still was grinning as if nothing happened. Why are you still smiling? Your brother could be dead. Ace just kept his grin and looked at Sengoku. Well, it's simple. Gomu Gomu no. My little brother. Culverin. Can't be defeated that easily. Zoro upon seeing this flashed away and saw how he was open, a chance to strike back. He flashed and kicked Luffy with a devil fruit infused kick, but it did nothing. It felt like rubber armored, but still rubbery. Zoro was shocked. I told you already you won't be able to do anything against me. Luffy just bounced off his kick. Zoro flashed away. You can't get away from me, Luffy shouted. Zoro noticed that previous attack was still coming from him. He flashed, but it was still stretching. Keep going after him, Python. It kept stretching further and further. He flashed, but it stretched further. He flashed again, but it stretched further. How far can it stretch? Enough. Zoro flashed again but faced towards the incoming fist this time. Dust fall already. Asakani sacred jewel. Gomu Gomu no. Both attacks impacted, but Luffy overpowered his. Zoro gaped and was surprised at this, and before he could react, the Haki-coated fist collided with his face. Culverin. He was immediately sent crashing down into the ground, creating a deep hole. Luffy, not being able to withstand his form anymore, reverted back to normal. Damn, can't use Haki for the next minutes. Luffy, seeing how he wasn't blocked, smiled. He had a clear opening. I am coming to save you, Ace, Luffy shouted while smiling, and he booked it towards Ace. The surrounding pirates and marines alike were open-mouthed and had stopped fighting once they saw what Ace's brother did. He was a rookie from East Blue. Since when did that sea had a monster like him to single-handedly defeat the admirals like that? Whitebeard just laughed in approval of what he did. This brat could do it. He may take after Roger. Jinbei was impressed and had gained massive respect for Luffy. To think Ace's brother was that strong. Crocodile just smirked. Had a gut feeling that brat was interesting. Garp was surprised. Since when was he that strong? Why couldn't he have been a marine? Ace smiled and laughed. You see that Sabo, our brother, absolutely kicked ass. Bo Hancock was being Bo Hancock. The Whitebeard commanders smiled. Block of the marines from reaching Ace's little brother Izo commanded. Yeah. Gotta land. The older ones were shocked but were amazed and impressed by what he did. Way to go, Luffy. The younger ones were very amazed and were awed and had stars in their eyes. Their older brother was strong. Big Mom was proud and beamed at what Luffy did. That's my son. Hadakuri was smirking underneath his scarf. He was interested in having a spar with him when they get him back in their family's embrace. The Charlottes were cheering on what their brother did. He had beaten the Admiral so easily. The older ones were simply proud and amazed at what he did. Some even has stars in their eyes, Bruley and Effler being the most prominent, while the younger ones had cheered on when they saw their brother did that. He's so strong and cool. Effler turned, pointed at Luffy on the screen and turned towards her three other sisters. He's so cool, with a big grin on her face with stars in her. Hachi snorted, Mondi giggled, and a man smirked while ruffling her hair. She looked like a kid after getting a bowl of candy. Big Mom simply smiled warmly at the screen while letting out a tear. Luffy, you have really grown stronger, haven't you? She couldn't be any more prouder of what her son had become. Her blood was strong in him. At Marineford. The execution platform is right front of us, Straw Hat Boy. Ivankov had stepped to the side and would intervene if he saw Luffy struggling. He wanted to see what the son of his boss could do. The answer, a lot. He really is Dragon Son Vat strength, were his thoughts. Just keep running straight ahead. Yeah. Luffy noticed someone with scissors running by him, Crab-chan. And Inazuma had carved up the ground that reached the platform. The marines were panicking. Has got a clear path, is heading straight for the execution platform. The rear admiral tried to command. That to him. We can't, we are being held off. At Totto land. At him. Free Ace. Some of the Charlottes shouted, cheering their brother on. At Marineford. The Whitebeard pirates had made a clear opening and making sure to maintain it. Ace's brother keep running forward and Luffy did just that. Some high-ranking marines appeared in front of him to try and stop him, only to be stomped away when he inflated his leg and slammed it on them. More marines were trying to rush towards Straw Hat but couldn't. The pirates were holding them at bay. Stop, Straw Hat. Oh, Straw Hat, free Ace. Zoro had recovered and tried to fire a beam at Luffy, only to be hit by Whitebeard. He couldn't dodge after being hit by his fist. It really had weakened him. Luffy, now running up towards Ace via the path made by Crab-chan, smiled. He was so close. Here I come, Ace. But sadly, it wasn't over yet. One more obstacle had jumped in front of him. The hero of the Navy. Garp. His Gigi. Upon landing, he had stomped on the platform, making it slowly break. He had to be quick before it breaks apart. There's no way I'll step aside. I am a Vice Admiral from Navy HQ. If you want to get past me, then do it over my dead body. Straw Hat Luffy. Luffy gaped in surprise before gritting his teeth. He knew what he had to do. He had to get past him. He had to beat Gigi. The platform broke even more and was becoming less stable, and everyone was tense. Do something, Straw Hat Boy. If you don't act fast, the bridge will fall, Ivankov said, some pirates even shouting his name in worry. Could he do it? At Totto land. That's Oven perked up at who was blocking the way. If it was him, it would be a problem. Monkey D. Garp, hero of the Marines, Luffy's grandfather too. Big Mom answered her son. Although she and her children were worried, their mother had told tales of her times during being a Rocks pirates and how Garp had chased them and was able to beat them with Roger's help. They were worried. Could he do it? At Marineford. Garp reminded Luffy again. I've told you already, if you want to get past me, then it'll be over my dead body. Luffy gritted his teeth, more reminiscent about his Gigi before snapping out of it. His face hardened. He had seen into the future and saw what his Gigi would say. Luffy, I now regard you as me enemy. Garp wind up his fist to go in for a punch, but sadly, he remembered about Luffy when he was a child and he faltered. Taking this opportunity, Luffy wind up his own one and punched Garp out of the way, screaming. He immediately plummeted into the ground, although he had a resigned face in doing so. He took that hit willingly. Sengoku had noticed this. You play the parent after all. Garp. Zoro, panting, looked onwards. Looks like he's gonna make it to the execution platform. And he did. Luffy had done it. Ace was stunned at the sight of Luffy in front of him standing on the platform. He did it. Luffy smiled at Ace upon landing on his execution platform. I finally made it. Ace was gaping a bit at the sight Luffy, and then he smiled softly. You always were ridiculously strong. Luffy went to Ace cuff and finding his key in his pocket, while Sengoku hardened his expression and started to glow. He was using his devil fruit. The Marine commented about it. Look, Fleet Admiral Sengoku is using his ability. Luffy, just as he was about to unlock it with the key, had it shot off with an icicle. Aokiji had recovered, although was bleeding from his head, panting heavily. The key. The Marines, upon seeing this, aimed at the platform. Aim. Now, as brothers, I will execute you myself, Sengoku exclaimed, bring his fist down upon them, but before he could, Luffy had cushioned it. He had inflated it while Galdino, disguised as an executioner, built a wax cover to cover him and Ace. The impact caused the scaffolding to fall. Ah, we are falling, Galdino exclaimed. Luffy was surprised. Don't worry, I will make a key. Those shackles will be off in no time. Luffy nodded at this. Fire blast them with the platform. The Marines had several cannons and guns aimed and fired at their direction. Galdino finished making the key. Save your brother, Straw Hat, I am on it. Boom. The cannonballs had exploded on them. Everyone was tense. Did we get them? Luffy. Ace. All three of them were hit. Everyone was waiting for the smoke from the explosion to dissipate. At Totto land. Luffy, the Charlottes exclaimed, shocked and worried. If their brother had done it, the smoke was obscuring their bodies. Big Mom had clung onto his chairs while the siblings held onto each other for support, just in case the worst happens. They waited and waited until shackles had come falling down. The shackles, they thought, that would mean. At Marineford. Everyone was tense until thud. The shackles, the Marines and pirates exclaimed. They came off, the Marines dreaded, while the pirates were slowly starting to smile until flames burst out of the smoke. In the shape of Whitebeard's Jolly Roger. Honestly, you never had change, have ya, Luffy? Ace grinned at his brother and his brother beamed back. He did it. Ace. Always doing the impossible as if it were a vice and doing the dumbest things, Ace said. Seriously, his brother always defied his expectations in every way possible, but that's how his brother was. He really was something else. Luffy just laughed at that. He always made Ace dumbstruck when he was able to beat strong people, as if they were nothing back when they were living with Dayton. If only Sabo were here. The Marines had sweated and gritted their teeth upon seeing this. Fire Fist to see has been freed. The pirates cheered and smiling brightly in approval of what they're seeing. He did it. When Marines aimed their weapons prepared to fire at Ace, he had obliterated them with a Fire Fist. Upon landing, they were on guard, arms raised. They were going to get out of her alive. The Luffy chirped back in response. Arigato. No, Luffy just grinned in response. Shishi, of course we are brothers, we will always be there for each other. Luffy exclaimed, which had Ace smile wider at. Let's get out of here, Luffy shouted. Yeah, Ace responded. At Totto land. Luffy did it. The Charlottes cheered on when it was revealed that their brother freed Ace, a person Luffy considered a brother. Now all they need to do is escape. At Marineford. They sure are lively, Jozu exclaimed, the other division commanders with him smiling at the sight. Ace's brother did it is free. Clear a path for Ace and Straw Hat to escape, Haruto ordered. Yeah. Ace and Luffy sprinted towards the Whitebeard pirates, Luffy throwing several fist and kicks, whacking the marines away, while Ace was burning and roasting them. They tried to shoot them, but they either went through Ace or deflected right back at them after shooting Straw Hat. Ace, running with Luffy, side by side, looked at Luffy smiling and made a declaration. "Na Luffy, someday we'll beat you. Shushi, sure I will be waiting." It was going good until Aokiji came blocking their way. Ace smirked and put his hands in front of Luffy. "Na Luffy, let me handle this one." "Sure." Luffy responded, stepping back. "Decent beak. I can." The two attacks collided with each other, both cancelling each other out. Luffy awed at this. "You have gotten stronger, Ace." Ace smiled back, "Thanks, Luffy." At Totto land. For Ace to counter an Admiral Aokiji's attack, Oven said, he wondered if his heat fruit is strong enough to counter that ice. "It's to be expected, he is the ND commander of Whitebeard after all," Snack said, which had all the siblings agreeing with. "To be the ND division commander of Whitebeard you have got to be strong." At Marineford. Smack. Fleet Admiral. "What a disgrace, how could have let them get away," Sengoku exclaimed. "Admiral Sakazuki, are you alright, sir?" He was in bad shape, Luffy's kick may have broken a couple of his bones. "I will not let them get away from here." Squadro had tried sacrificing himself, but Whitebeard had stopped his ship, not wanting to see his son sacrifice himself for his foolishness, and gave an order. His final order. "Listen up. We have completed our objective here, we no longer have any business here. The order I am about to give will be my final orders as your captain." At this the commanders and allies were shocked. His final order. "This is where we will be parting all of you, make sure you survive and reunite with each other in the new world." His sons were in disbelief and in denial over this. "Pops, what do you mean? We can still make it back." "Yeah. I am the one at the top of this earth, there is no ship to carry me in the new era," exclaimed Whitebeard, bringing his fist down, taking a handful of marines. "Whitebeard," Sengoku shouted, "damn, that bastard is planning to bring Marineford down with him while the others escape." "Asen. Boyaji." Luffy and Ace exclaimed, they couldn't believe it. The era is changing, Whitebeard thought, it all started on that sea. Whitebeard took a deep breath before proceeding to buy time for his sons to get out of here. "Now. Let's settle this." Whitebeard continued destroying and absolutely going all out on Marineford. At Totto land. "Edward." Big Mom muttered. She knew Newgate was going to sacrifice himself for the sake of his son's escape from Marineford. She was a bit sad though, a rocks pirate shouldn't be killed by something like that. A rocks pirates can only be killed by a rocks pirate, only Kaido, herself and Shiki could kill him, and they also are the only ones allowed to kill her. But she understands that he won't be able to last longer, even old age wasn't avoidable for the strongest man. "Farewell, Edward Newgate, you were a nice drinking buddy." At Marineford. Some of the pirates were on board of the ship to escape, but some couldn't. How could they leave their old man behind? They let out tears pleading their captain to come with them, but he stood his ground and told them it was captain's order. Most of them obeyed with heavy hearts, while the others didn't want to leave, but were dragged into the ship. Although they couldn't blame them, they wanted Pops to come with them. But it was his final orders. Ace just stood looking at Whitebeard in disbelief while he swung his weapon upon those approaching to stop his sons from escaping. Ace attacked some marines before he reached to his father figure, with Ace holding on to Luffy. Whitebeard stopped attacking, sensing his son and turning around to face him. "There's no need for words, just answer a question for me, Ace. Was I a good father?" Ace clung until Luffy tightly and looked at his father into his eyes. "Of course, Dad." Whitebeard smiled softly and looked at Luffy and were silently communicating through eye contact. They both nodded and Luffy grabbed Ace and booked it to the ship. Whitebeard turned towards the marines, feeling fulfilled by Ace's answer. He started wreaking havoc and letting loose. They were running towards the ship with Jinbei behind them while the marines were trying to gun them down. "Keep going forward, Ace-kun, Luffy-kun." "Yeah." They were close to the ship until. "Do you really think I will let you run away after all? Whitebeard is nothing but a loser from a dead era." Ace stopped and turned towards the bastard who said that. It was Akainu. "Take back what you said." His ship brothers tried to convince him to go back to the ship, but he didn't listen, although they couldn't blame him. They wanted to kill that bastard who would dare insult their father. Your father, Gold Roger, conquered the entire Grand Line. What is Whitebeard when compared to that? Akainu was smirking arrogantly, he was agitating Ace. He also noticed the other commanders and pirates twitching or glaring at him. Ace in response burned brighter and his scowl deepening. At Totto land. "That man is trying to agitate him." Hadakuri stated, underneath his scarf he was frowning, he didn't like what Akainu was trying to do. To use such an underhanded technique was playing dirty. Smoothie scowled, she may have been a pirate, but that was pretty low of him. The Charlottes didn't like one bit what Akainu was trying to pull here. At Marineford. I mean, did he even have the guts to fight against Roger? In other words, Whitebeard is a Lear, North Dakota. Everyone looked at Luffy and saw how he had a similar face like Ace. Take back what you said about Ace's Asen. Luffy shouted. Ace powered down and looked at his brother with a soft look. Luffy. Akainu focused on Luffy this time. Why should I'm just speaking the truth is a big low. Akainu was cut off when Luffy appeared in front of him with his hand covered in Haki. Minutes passed after gear. He could use Haki again. Akainu raised his arms to his head and chest. You won't catch me off guard Mugiwara, Akainu exclaimed mentally. Gomu Gomu no. Akainu noticed Straw Hat wasn't aiming for his head, in fact he was aiming lower, but before he could do anything. Pistol. With hands covered in Haki he had delivered a devastating blow towards Akainu that made him kneel and screech in extreme pain. He had punched Akainu in the Haki-coated punch. To the yikes. At Totto land. Yeah go Luffy. The female Charlottes including Big Mom herself cheered, he deserved that. The male Charlottes were pale and white from what their brother did. The Haki-coated punch to the some could feel the phantom pain, some even felt a bit of sympathy for him. Some prayed. Rip Akainu's children. At Marineford. The Marines upon seeing this winced and could feel the impact. That's a lot of damage. That's what you get for bad-mouthing the Asen. Luffy exclaimed. Ahahaha that's what you get for talking shit. You Ace taunted Akainu with the biggest shit-eating grin of all time, with a middle finger pointing at him. He had taught Luffy from a young age to hit people there if they said strange things about his rubber powers. Damn pedophiles going after cute boys, especially his cute innocent naive little brother, or acted mean and horrible to other people in him. Makino scolded him for that. He didn't tell her the reason, he kind of forgot, but seeing Akainu kneeling on the ground in pain it was worth it. Marco approached Luffy with a smile, enjoying Akainu's suffering. "Nah, Luffy right," Marco called out to Luffy, who chirped back in response and turned his head towards him. "Thanks for doing that to him," Marco smirked to Luffy, which he returned. The Whitebeard pirates were smiling at Luffy for what he did and also wincing when they say how much strength he put into that, except for their only sister Whitey, who was laughing from afar witnessing the whole thing happen. And also laughing at Akainu's misery. That's what you get for talking bad about our old man. Mugiwara. Luffy, thanks for doing that for the old man. Way to go Ace's brother. Don't talk bad about our old man, thanks Luffy. Were some of the things the pirates were saying, grateful that Ace's brother did that to him. Luffy just laughed at all of this. Marco looked at Whitebeard before letting out some tears and shouted towards his brothers, "Farewell Oyaji. Everyone let's leave." Yeah. They safely boarded the ship and set sailed. Many mourned for their pops, but were glad for what Straw Hat did to Akainu. Luffy next to Ace looked at him and he looked back, smiling. They shake hands. Luffy had done it, he had gotten out of there and freed Ace. Although he also frowned a bit when he looked back, he wished he could have the Asen with him. At this Ace also looked back with him, followed by Marco, then Izo, then Jozu, then followed by all of them. Luffy waved smiling sadly. "Farewell Asen." Whitebeard looked at the ships retreating and saw the faces of his son disappear off into the distance. He smiled softly and waved back farewell to them when he saw how Luffy waved at him, which was followed by his sons who were crying. He looked at Akainu, who was kneeling in pain, and could hear him saying "Why?" in a high-pitched voice before fainting, which he laughed at. Now then to deal with the Marines. And his traitorous son who arrived. On the ship. When the side of Marineford vanished, they stopped waving and went to check on the others and tend to the wounded. Luffy, remembering what Ace had said, turned to Ace. "Ace. What is it?" Lou, a nickname he had given Luffy during when they were children. "About what you said back then." What does mean?" Ace went pale. Upon leaving Marineford, they reach an island where the Marines wouldn't find them, while their allies split up to divert their attention or to escape from the Marines. Right now, the island they were at also were broadcasting the events at Marineford, and upon seeing it, they immediately scowled. While they were getting away, it seemed the traitorous backstabbing bastard's son had arrived. Marshal D. Teach, or more known as Blackbeard, had came to finish off Whitebeard. Before their father had succumbed to his wounds with his remaining strength. Shouted his final words. His last middle finger and you to the Marines and governments. One Piece is real. Upon their father uttering his final words, all smiled softly but had tears in their eyes. That was something their old man would do. After that, Teach had covered Whitebeard up and did something. They didn't what he well in there, but he was using Oyaji's devil fruit somehow. They were initially shocked, but quickly were infuriated and furious that the bastard's son had stolen his devil fruit somehow. He was challenging the Marines to fight, but before he could, a ship arrived with a certain red-hair Yonko. "Shanks," Luffy shouted upon seeing him. "You know him?" Jinbei asked, raising an eyebrow at him along with everyone else except for Ace, who was told about him and even met him. Yeah, he came to my island when I was 6, and when some bandits were badmouthing him and trashing the place, the bandits kidnapped me, and I beat them up. Luffy said cheerfully, while the Whitebeard pirates had deadpan look. They should be surprised at the fact a child beat up a group of bandits, but after seeing what he did in Marineford they just couldn't. The red-haired Yonko had come to end the war, and he would handle the burial of Whitebeard. The Whitebeard pirates were grateful for that, and also challenging Blackbeard and the Marines to a fight if they wanted one. They backed off with Blackbeard retreating and Sengoku announcing, "The war has ended." After that announcement, they went to get barrels of alcohol and a bottle for juice for Luffy, and proceeded to pour them into mugs. Marco got everyone a mug of beer while Luffy a mug of juice and raised his own mug while everyone followed. The Pops. The Oyaji. The Whitebeard. The Asen. Were the many things they said with some tears in their eye. They cheered at the fact that even though their father was dead, they had gotten Ace out alive. After celebrating, mourning and drinking they had taken a rest. At Totto Land, Whole Cake Island, throne room. When Edward said his final words, Big Mom smirked that the Marines and government were going to have a headache. Not only did Roger state that he left One Piece for the taking, the Yonko Whitebeard, second closest to being the Pirate King, now announced the confirmation that One Piece was real. What a legend. Although she was pissed at Blackbeard for killing him, it should have been her or Kaido to finish him off when she ever crosses paths with that backstabbing bastard. She will slaughter him with the biggest smile on her face. When Blackbeard had somehow stolen Edward's devil fruit, she and her children were shocked at the fact that he didn't die, although Big Mom was frowning more rather than being shocked. Something was wrong with him, but she didn't know what. Before she did slaughter him if he ever dared to set foot here, she was gonna use her devil fruit on him. Something felt off from his soul. After that, Shanks had come and ended the war, and thus came the conclusion with the broadcast ending after a few seconds of silence when Sengoku announced the end. Tamago, gather every information you can find about my son and what he has done along with his crewmates also, bring the intel to me around dinner. Of course, Mama Tamago left to search for information through several contacts and information brokers. My children, you are dismissed, look forward to dinner where Tamago would inform us about your little brother. Yes, Mama. Her children left while discussing things amongst each other, mostly the fact their brother had been found, the older ones looking cheerful and happy over the fact they had found him. Big Mom leaned back in her chair while still staring at the screen, but with a visible smile on her face. Her son was alive and had grown strong. Thank God you were fine, Luffy. Wait for me, Mama will get you back where you belong. At Marineford, after the war. After Sengoku announced the end, morale was pretty low. They had failed to execute Fire Fist Ace, and now him and his brother were loose out in the seas. He took a sit on a piece of rubble. Marineford had been completely destroyed. Straw Hat Sengoku clenched his fist thinking about him. How did we not notice his strength for him to beat admirals, freeing several prisoners, and lastly the worst, he had free Fire Fist Ace. How did a brat like that slipped under their radar? How did we miss the fact that he could use Haki? The more Sengoku thought, the more fury he felt for himself. Luffy was able to defeat the warlord Crocodile. He was able to get Devil Child Nico Robin out of Eni's lobby and defeated a Cipher Pole agent. They should have dealt with him sooner or looked further into him before. I'm gonna retire and leave it to Akiji, he seems to be a good fit for the role. Sengoku was going to Kong for the resignation tomorrow. Right now he wants to lay on a bed and sleep after the entire ordeal, but before he could get up and do just that, Fleet Admiral Sengoku Commodore Branu was calling out for him. Here you are, we've had word from Impel Down. Is Magellan alright? Sengoku asked with his eyes closed, preparing for the worst. He got beaten badly and is barely alive. He's been treated intensively by the medical team. Branu said. He's a dutiful man, he's blaming himself. Sengoku agreed with that statement. Magellan has taken great pride in Impel Down being the most secured prison. They said that if he could move now, he'd kill himself. Don't let him do such a stupid thing, Sengoku eyes open said to Branu. Why yes sir, Sengoku now asked the bigger question. They wouldn't just give word of the warden's status only, something must have happened down there. What has been going on at the prison? Allow me to give you the condition as it stands. The situation on level 6 is especially bad. It's literally a tragedy. This had Sengoku sweating. Level 6 held the worst prisoners. The tragedy. Branu proceeded to tell Sengoku what Blackbeard had done, which caused him to pale considerably. He freed selected members from the worst criminals in the world. This was bad, really bad. Yes. But only prisoners were taken. San Juan Wolf, Avalo Pizarro, Vasco Shot, Katarina Devon. But there are obviously more prisoners missing from level 6, which means Sengoku was now having a massive migraine at this. There are more escapees from level 6, aren't they? If even of them from level 6 sneaks in a country somewhere, the entire population would be in grave danger. Sengoku had to send marines to put them back, he had to. Validate the numbers of who's not in there, get their names, and put a most wanted list out now. Branu at this acted strangely, Sengoku looked worried. What's wrong? Well, I'm under orders from the world government to keep this matter a secret. Sengoku eyes widened at this. More blunders will harm the government's reputation. Sengoku clenched his face and was pissed at this. Damn them. Sengoku took a deep breath at this but was gritting his teeth. How could they let this go? Many people would be in danger for this. But later he relaxed, at least he was resigning and didn't have to deal with this mess. He was free. But before that, he also had to decide the new bounties on Fire Fist Ace's and Straw Hat Luffy's. After some time to compose himself and thinking thoroughly about this, he told the Commodore. Branu. Why yes, sir. Fire Fist Ace and Straw Hat Luffy their bounty. What about them? For Fire Fist Ace escaping execution, being Roger's son, and going toe-to-toe with Akiji, make his bounty. Theory? Yes. And for Straw Hat Luffy. For breaking in and out of Impel Down. Releasing several dangerous criminals, most notably Buggy, former warlords Crocodile and Jin the Knight of the Sea, Emporio Ivankov. Fighting, overwhelming, and defeating admirals, and castrating Admiral Sakazuki. And being the main reason why Ace has escaped. And being the son of Dragon. Make his bounty. The next day. With Whitebeard pirates and Luffy. When they were all sleeping, they were woken up by Marco. Everyone get up now. His brothers and Luffy woke up, some grumbling or some wanting to sleep more, but dragged themselves towards Marco and gathered. They saw Marco scowling with a newspaper. Izo grumbled, clearly wanting to sleep more. What is it? Marco started to look at the newspaper and read out loud. Fire Fist Ace execution failure, Emperor of the Sea Whitebeard dead, Blackbeard on the rise. At this they scowled or frowned at the reminder of their pop's death and how Teach had stolen his fruit. Also, I got a call from red-haired Shanks. He gave us coordinates on where Oyaji's grave is, Marco said with a solemn look. At this they also have a solemn look. They prepared for this, even though they didn't want this day to come. It was gonna happen anyway, be it death in Marineford or death by old age. Let's go properly pay him our respect as his sons. Far away in the second half of the Grand Line. They have arrived and made their way on top of a hill. Their allies were there, and they joined up with them. They made a path for Marco, Ace and Luffy to walk towards Shanks, who were facing them down with a sad smile. They arrived with Marco, Luffy and Ace greeting Shanks, Luffy being not as energetic as this was a serious moment. They faced forward and looked at his grave. Edward Newgate below his gravestones is decorated with different flowers placed by his several sons, and on top blue flowers with his weapon. Murakumajiri stabbed on top of his gravestone with his flag hanging by the hilt, and below it is his coat tied to it with a flower wreath around it. Red hair, Marco said before turning towards Shanks. I've no words to express my gratitude. Thanks for doing this for the Oyaji, Ace said bowing towards Shanks. Shanks responded with a soft smile. Stop talking nonsense. I always respected Whitebeard even though he was my enemy. Even Sengoku respected him. Shanks turned to Luffy smiling. Also nice to meet you again, Luffy. Ace. The Whitebeard pirates who separated from the main group perk up at this. Straw Hat Luffy knew Shanks. They have heard about Ace's encounter with Shanks, but weren't informed of the fact Straw Hat also knew the man. Luffy and Ace smiled back. Yeah. And also Shanks gave a thumbs up and patting Luffy's shoulder, while also grinning this time towards him. Good job on castrating Akainu. At this the serious tension was broken with faces of confusion and shock, while those who witnessed it were snickering or giggling at that. What do you mean? The pirate asked in confusion. Shanks looked at all of them this time with a newspaper in hand while smirking and read out loud the headline. Admiral Sakazuki castrated by Straw Hat Luffy. The admiral in question had been mocking Whitebeard, calling him a loser and a coward directly to Ace. At that they scowled and were gritting their teeth for what that bastard said. When it seemed like Fire Fist Ace was about to attack the admiral, his brother had stepped in, also enraged by what he said about Whitebeard. At this the Whitebeard pirates had soft look while looking at Straw Hat Luffy. He had instantly went in front of Akainu and wound up his fist and delivered a devastating punch towards said admiral's nether regions. Now at this they winced at first before they softly giggled and snorted at this. Whitey nodded while smiling in approval of Ace's little brother. Medics reported that the hit was so strong, Admiral Akainu was effectively castrated for life. Both his testicles are broken beyond repair, and in fact, they were completely non-existent at this point. And that's how it ends, Shanks said smiling. He was proud of what Luffy did. Upon hearing this, the Whitebeard pirates praised for what Luffy did to Akainu. They were grateful. Luffy, I also can't express my gratitude towards you for doing that, Marco said smiling. That's my little brother, Ace said with pride in his voice with a big grin. Alright. We should go now, Shanks smiled when he looked at Luffy and patted his hat. You have grown stronger. We will meet each other again one day. Yeah, and when I get there I will give your hat back. I will become king of the pirates, Luffy responded. At this Shanks laughed and walked off, while the others around him were stunned. Ace's brother was balsy as hell. Marco turned towards his brothers and his sister with a frown on his face at first. Let's mourn for our Oyaji. At this they respected Whitebeard in several ways, praying, putting flowers on his grave, crying for their loss. After everyone mourned, most of them left, the only ones staying were the division commanders, Jinbe and Luffy. Until a pirate came running. Marco big news everyone turned towards the pirate who was holding bounty posters. What is it Marco asked and he was handed the bounties and smiled turned towards Ace who was sitting with Luffy eating their plate of food when he saw Ace's. Ace. What is it? Their bounty increased at this it had everyone's attention, Ace and Luffy stopped eating how much is it now? Beery at this they cheered and raised their drinks for Ace who beamed at that. Sugoi Ace Luffy was amazed at his big brother's bounty. Ace took the bounty off Marco's hands to look at in astonishment. But he immediately scowled upon seeing his bounty. What's wrong Vista asked with a raised eyebrow, noticing how he seemed agitated. My name? Ace screeched bursting in flames which shocked them. What about it Luffy asked surprised by his sudden outburst. Ace just shoved the bounty in front of Luffy's face and read his name out loud. Goldie Ace. Luffy read out loud which caused him and along with the commanders to immediately understand his anger now. They felt sympathy for him, he had really hated his old man, it was the reason he stuck with Portgas instead. Marco deciding to change topic as an attempt to quell his anger which seemed to work, announcing his little brother's bounty anyways, Luffy your new bounty is. Marco looked at his bounty and was stunned by the increase. Something that Haruta noticed what's wrong Marco. Straw Hat Luffy. At this Luffy perked up and looked at Marco in curiosity. My bounty increased too. Marco just nodded and was trying to get the words out. Yeah, it's. At Totto Land, Whole Cake Island, dining room of the castle. All the children were gathered and took their respective seats, they were served copious amounts of foods and beverages, they did take after their mother's appetite after all, while their mother was waiting for Tamago to come back. This here Katakuri said looking into the future, at this the Charlottes looked at the door and Tamago had opened and appeared before them. Tamago was nervous and tense when all Charlotte childrens including Big Mom were staring at him. Ah Tamago so what have you found about my missing son Big Mom asked while sipping a cup of tea to help calm her nerves. I have contacted our usual informants and told them about the situation of Luffy and have some interesting information to say the least, Tamago said sweating slightly when Big Mom put her cup down and started staring at him along with her children. So what have you found Big Mom asked hardening her stare a bit at the part where he said interesting. It seems he was raised in East Blue on an island known as Dawn Island on a village called Fuchsia. We were told about his childhood experience by a woman who owns a bar. Tamago was now sweating less and frowning a bit, he had heard about what Garp did to his own son, it was not pretty. Childhood experience Fukia raised an eyebrow at that while Tamago slowly nodded, the way he phrased it doesn't sound good. We weren't given much and it was the tip of the iceberg of what he had been through. Tamago said no longer sweating but was looking more angered. He was a child didn't deserve to go through that. So far of what we could gather, Garp had trained Luffy by throwing him valleys, leaving him alone in dangerous forests, tied to balloons over dangerous heights, and fell and broke several bones. The Charlottes were upon hearing this were horrified, but that feeling was replaced with anger and fury for what Garp had done. What a man said coldly with reptilian eyes. Tamago was the bar owner Smoothie asked with a poker face, but if you saw her eye it held anger. The woman who went by Makino she was the one who would patch Luffy up when he was trained by Garp, she had only witnessed some of what Luffy had been through. How old was Luffy when he was trained, asked Perispero with a hardened look while clutching his candy cane tightly. He was there along with Kompet to raise the children and made sure to give them a good childhood when their mama was different back then, he would always be there for his younger siblings, so when Luffy had slipped out of their grasp, he was worried about him. And it seemed his worries came true. According to the bar owner, she first witnessed Luffy's training when he was years old. Slam. Burlee had slammed the table in anger and looked at Tamago with a murderous look, although she spoke softly with restrained anger. He was years old Burlee said slowly, as if she was making sure she heard things wrong. Sadly, she didn't. Tamago nodded at this. Yes, but this was only by an eyewitness, we don't actually know the confirmed age. Big Mom was very murderous right now, clinging onto her chair very hard and letting a slip of her conqueror's haki out, causing the guards to get knocked out before she compassed herself. If Garp comes on our island I'm sure you all would want to have a nice long chat with him, right their mother said with venom in her voice towards her children. The siblings nodded and had a dark look in their eyes, yes mama, I'm sure we would like to talk it out with him. Big Mom with a deep breath looked at Tamago. Continue. Yes, after a certain day after training, he had went to the bar where he had come into contact with the Yonko red-haired Shanks, the siblings' eyes widened at this. Shanks, what was he doing at East Blue of all places? Smoothie asked in shock and curiosity, for someone like him to be in the eastern seas, what was so important that had him sail there? We haven't found out why, but it seems during his stay on that island, Luffy and Red Hair are on good terms. Tamago, the specific information I asked for, what's his devil fruit? Big Mom asked, which had her children look at her for a second before looking at Tamago. Yeah, they were also wondering that. His devil fruit is the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It's a paramecia type fruit that makes the person who eats it into a rubber person. Are you serious? Cracker asked, staring wide-eyed at this. It sounded kind of useless, but he saw what he did in Marineford, that was it, he did all that with that kind of devil fruit. Tamago nodded towards Cracker. Yes, he is immune to blunt attacks, unless infused with Haki and normal bullets, and cannonballs quite literally bounce off him. Not only that, but due to him being rubber, he is most likely immune to lightning. The Charlottes and even Big Mom were shocked at this. That devil fruit sounds weak as hell, but that sounds useful as hell, Effler said. She was surprised by how useful that fruit was. The way he uses it and also his gear, he seems very creative, Smoothie said while her siblings nodded in agreement. Their brother had used a fruit in such a way that no one else would think of. He was able to beat admirals with a technique he came up with that combined both his armament and devil fruit in a way that made it look like he was a mythical zone. It was pretty genius. 6. Tamago continued onwards when they were now looking at him in anticipation. During his time in East Blue, he has defeated several big-name pirates, the biggest being the Fishman Arlong. Of course, he is my son with Charlotte blood running in his veins, not to mention that bastard too, Big Mom stated with pride. Tamago continued when they were just silently staring at him. He had sailed with his crew to Lobetown, where Tamago now gulped in worry of Big Mom's anger and fury when she hears his next words. Where what? Big Mom asked, raising an eyebrow at him. Where Buggy and Iron Mace Alvidicott Straw had off guard and were gonna execute him in the same place as Rogers. Tamago quickly set out. How all of them said with looks of fear, anger, fury. The look that promised pain. Tamago quickly said his next words before they asked questions about it. But before he was executed, the platform Luffy was on was struck by lightning. Now they quickly shifted from anger quickly to huge concern. Not only was he gonna be executed, but he was struck by lightning. Calm down, Tamago stated. He was immune to lightning, so he should have been fine, Perispero said, arms crossed, and glared at Tamago. Right. Tamago nodded rapidly. Yes, he had stood up from the rubble after the scaffolding collapse and he said, I am alive, that's nice. At this the Charlottes were relieved. Seriously, this was just the start. What the hell kind of things had he been through? They were starting to feel a bit of sympathy for his crew that were with him. They must have a lot of heart attacks from their brother, seemingly being a trouble magnet. 6. Tamago continued on to explain his journey from Paradise where he fought the King Wapple of Drum Kingdom and how he had previously retreated when there was an attack. The Charlotte scowled at That he sounded like a coward and went to Arabasta where he met Fire Fist Ace, his sworn brother, and he later went to Mocktown and beat up another big named pirate going by Bellamy, and later on he went to Water where he gone to Eni's lobby. He was at Eni's lobby. Gallet widened her eyes at this along with some of her other siblings, while the others kept a poker face or narrowed their eyes at that. Yes, it seemed that its CP agent had kidnapped one of his crewmates and him with his crew stormed the place to rescue her. Luffy also defeated the agent, Rob Lucci. The more they hear about his adventures and his accomplishments, the more amazed and impressed they were. Later on, he was in Thriller Bark. You don't need to explain that one. Lola had informed us of the events that took place. Big Mom told Tamago, the siblings who weren't there when Lola called looking at their mother wondering what has happened. For those of you who don't know, Luffy defeated Gecko Moria and had also gained a new crewmember there, a skeleton musician going by the name Brook. The siblings who didn't know were surprised by that. Their brother defeated a warlord. Later on, he would go to Sabati where Humpet picked up a cup of tea and began drinking. He punched a celestial dragon. And immediately spat it out after that. Her siblings also spitting or choking whatever they were eating or drinking, while the ones who weren't were gaping at that, a celestial dragon. They deserve it. Amanda nodding in approval when she heard that. Her siblings also agree, the celestial dragons were shit. His gut snack nodded while smirking at that. An admiral had been called on the Straw Hats, but not only that, Luffy was accompanied by 2 other pirates who were supernovas like him. The Charlottes perked up at the mention of the supernovas. They were essentially super rookies who surpassed or had a bounty of around Beery. They were considered the worst generation and standing on top and being the most dangerous one was Luffy, her son. She was proud of his son becoming a terror in the making. Luffy with the pirate Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law confronted the Marines themselves, decimating the Marines before heading off separately. Then Luffy and his crew disappeared before being confronted by a pacifista developed by the Marines and later being confronted by the warlord Kuma, where he used his devil fruit and sent them away to unknown locations. At this the Charlottes were worried about their brother's well-being. They didn't know if he was close with them or not, but if he was, that must have hurt to be separated from his nakama. After that it seemed he was informed of the execution as he later broke in and out of Impel Down with prisoners, which later would be what you have seen on the broadcast. He must have been searching for Ace in that prison, but by the time he got there he was already on a ship sailing for Marineford. Hadakuri theorized, he also respected and was impressed by his determination to save his brother. To go to that kind of lengths for him they must have been close. Which brings us to now. One of them asked. His bounty updated with him in the news. Tamago pulled out a newspaper seemingly from nowhere and started reading. Admiral Sakazuki castrated by Straw Hat Luffy. The admiral in question had been mocking Whitebeard, calling him a loser and a coward directly to Ace. The Charlottes frowned or were gritting their teeth. They did not like what he tried to pull when looking at the viewing. When it seemed like Fire Fist Ace was about to attack the admiral, his brother had stepped in, also enraged by what he said about Whitebeard. In such a short time meeting with Whitebeard, Luffy must have respected him to the point where he stepped in because of how disrespectful he was. Montour commented. He had instantly went in front of Akainu and wound up his fist and delivered a devastating punch towards said admiral's nether regions. The males wince remembering the blow, while the woman of the family smiled and smirked. Medics reported that the hit was so strong, Admiral Akainu was effectively castrated for life. Both his testicles are broken beyond repair, and in fact, they were completely non-existent at this point. Rip that admiral's future children. Cracker said, which hit his siblings snorting and snickering in amusement. So, his bounty Smoothie asked Tamago. His bounty Tamago hadn't looked at the poster yet, but when he did, he was frozen in place. What is it? Amanda asked, raising an eyebrow at Tamago. How high was it now? Is almost as high as Katakuri's. At this they choked or did a spit take and whipped to Tamago in stunned silence with wide eyes. Even said man Katakuri going wide-eyed at that. Big Mom was as surprised as them. Almost Nutmeg said. As high Akamig said. As Almig said. Katakuri Haremig said. Naisamas Fiamig said. Bounty they all said together. Their little brother may have surpassed Smoothie and is on par with Katakuri in terms of bounty. Yes, his new bounty being exactly Beery. Our baby brother seems to be quite the powerhouse, Perisparrow exclaimed, proud his little brother had a bounty on par with Katakuri, with Kompet nodding alongside him with joy in her face. In fact, it seemed like the Charlottes were celebrating or cheering at that. They had a brother who was also worth Beery besides their big brother Katakuri. The sweet commanders Katakuri, Smoothie, Cracker and Snack were getting excited. They had a little brother who could be like them, a sweet commander who would probably be on par with either one of them. Once they got him back, they wanted to spar with him. Mama, my missing son is so strong. Big Mom was proud of her son's accomplishment, learning that his bounty is almost as high as her ND eldest son made her beam with pride. She had a son who was pretty much the sweet commander at this point. She needed to get him back with her family to bond with after years of being separated. And then she frowned. She also needed to know what Garp did to her son. It was only based off someone who only saw some of his training, not allowed it, but in the meantime they needed him to be back in their arms. Then moving on to his crew. Tamago, that would be enough. I think my children and I would look to hear him talk about it himself here with us, yes. The Charlottes turned towards their mother with a feeling of hope. You mean Bruley had hopeful looks in her eyes which went watery. Big Mom nodded and smiled softly at her children. She stood up and made an announcement that they have waited to hear for a long time. Some even had tears in their eyes as they have waited for this day to come for their mother to finally announce it. It's time for our missing son to return home. They celebrated and cheered at that. Tamago put pressure on our usual contacts on the whereabouts of Luffy. Yes, mama. Somewhere on a ship. The man was staring at the sea. He was smiling until child silhouettes appeared and called out to him. Sabo, the one with the straw hat, said. Sabo, the one with the pipe, said. Plus. Sabo-kun. He had snapped out of it and the silhouettes faded away. There you are, is something wrong? He looked down and responded to the woman who called for him. No, I was just looking out at the sea. That's so. She now faced towards where they were sailing, their main base of operations. We're back in Baltigo for the first time in a month. I hope everyone's doing fine. They had been on a mission that took quite a while and haven't really heard much from them, keeping radio silent. Yeah, we had our hands busy from all those missions. Let's make a report to Dragon Sand first. The Baltigo, the Revolutionary Army's general headquarters. As Sabo opened the door with Cola behind her, it was kind of chaotic. His comrades have been running towards the situation room in a hurry. Something must have happened while they were away. Two revolutionaries spotted them and stopped. Oh, Chief of Staff, you came at the right time. Come to the situation room. The paramount war between the Navy and the Whitebeard pirates has ended. They were a bit surprised at this, but they followed them into the room. Upon entering, many of their comrades were gathered around with their boss, the leader of the revolutionaries, Dragon. The man came in with a bunch of newspaper in hand and placed them all on the table where they could read about it, the people around him picking up and reading the news headlines, and were stunned. Whitebeard died. So, one of the 4 emperors of the sea has been taken down. The Navy received heavy casualties for this, but it's to be expected they were asking for it when they announced his execution. What about Ivan-sama, is she alright? It doesn't state anywhere that she died or anything. The only one who died was Whitebeard, who had stayed to protect. Sabo and Cola, not interested in the news, proceeded to the hallway, wanting to take a well-deserved break after the whole ordeal. They would just read the newspaper later. His sons and allies from dying especially. Sabo was about to reach for the door until he heard something from his fellow revolutionary. The would-be person to be executed, Fire Fist Ace. Sabo stopped and raised his head at that name. Why does it sound? But more importantly, Dragon-san, look. Is it true, is Straw Hat Luffy your son? He took down admirals and castrated. Yes, he is. Dragon smirked, seeing one of the headlines where his son beaten admirals and castrated Admiral Sakazuki. He was proud of what his son had done. Sabo turned back, those name Luffy's. He walked towards the table and grabbed a newspaper to read it for himself. Upon seeing it, he widened his eyes. He started sweating a bit. This guy. He looked at the headline. Fire Fist Ace lives. Sabo's head started to hurt a bit, then he saw something in his mind. I remember. I'm gonna become a pirate. I will defeat others and become infamous. It'll be the only proof of my life. The newspaper had small wet spots. He was sweating more. I remember. It doesn't matter if all the people around the world reject me or despise me. I'll become a great pirate and show them what I can do. Slam. He was breathing deeply. He was starting to remember a bit more. Ace Luff. Sabo-kun, are you alright? Cola had noticed how Sabo seemed to be breathing deeply. You're acting strange. There were more wet spots on the newspaper now, and they weren't from sweat. They were from tears. Sabo started crying a bit. Ace Luffy. I can't believe Ace was Gold Roger's son. He was the biggest threat to the Navy. They wanted to get rid of him at all costs, but ultimately failed. The memories started appearing. Did you guys know? They say Akainu was trying to get under Ace's skin, but Luffy had stepped in and punched him in the balls. He was crying and breathing deeply more. Ace Luffy. Do you remember at that day? We can become brothers if we exchange a cup of the sake. Brothers, really? When we become pirates, we might not be on the same ship, but our brotherhood will always be with us. Wherever you are, whatever you do, we will always be bonded together. They took a cup each and smiled. So, from now on. We will be brothers. Yeah. He started crying more, taking his hands off the table. Slam. Just to slam the table harder. Are you alright, Sabo? It was getting harder for him to stand, breathing harder and more tears coming out of his eyes. It all started coming back. This is ramen, it looks good, well, try it. I need more. More bowls of ramen. The ramen noodles tasted great, I told you so. Me, I'm Sabo. I heard that you're an old hag who's like a man among men. I'm a woman, can't you tell? Aiden. When I become a pirate, I'm gonna get the best cook in the world. I'm gonna become a pirate first, so good luck with that. Not fair, I'm gonna become a pirate before either of you. Oh, you guys still on about that? Garp. I heard Ace was mischievous. But you seem like a good boy. No, I'm not. Makino. He couldn't take it anymore. Sabo-kun, Sabo Chief. Now I know. The one who survived wasn't some random pirate. The one got him out wasn't some random pirate. Memories kept playing throughout his head. He wasn't just some threat in the pirate era that needed to be eliminated. Ace Luffy, they are my brothers. And I did nothing to help. I'm not gonna run from anybody, I'm not gonna lose to anyone. Ace turned back and looked sheepish while rubbing the back of his head. Well, maybe, except you, Luffy, you really are strong as hell. He had blacked out from the sudden rush of memories and was starting to wake up. He saw a revolutionary with Cola and the one who trained him since he was a child, Hack. Upon seeing him open his eyes, they went from concern and worry to relief. The chief woke up. Really, that's great. He seemed to be in the medical room of the headquarters. He rose up and saw Cola slowly start to cry when they faced each other. He was surprised at that. I thought you were gonna die, Sabo-kun. You had quite the high fever, Sabo. Hack said. Cola leaped onto Sabo's lap and hitting her fist onto him, she was really worried. You've been sleeping for a day straight and I have been worrying. Sabo rubbed his head in guilt. Yeah, sorry, it's just Adi got my memories back. Sniff, what, you got your memory back? Sabo turned back facing forward. Yeah, I remember everything now. Including who I am and why I left home to sail out to sea. I see Cola now smiled even though there's still a bit of tears left in her eye. That's good. But then it hit her. Wait, are you going to quit the Revolutionary Army then? Hak also realized this, he got his memories back and remembers his identity, he may want to go back to how he was. Sabo closed his eyes in deep thought before opening them and responding, no, I'm not. Cola smiled at that, her partner wasn't leaving. Is Dragon Sense still here? Yeah, he is. I need to talk to him. Dragon's main office. Yo Dragon, it's me Sabo, can I come in? Go ahead. Sabo entered Dragon's office and took a seat in front of him. Are you okay Sabo? I heard that you were awake after sleeping for days, what happened? Dragon-san. I remember Dragon at this raised his eyes at that and leaned forward at Sabo. So what will you do now? I will stay. Beauty need to visit people. Someone is it from your recovered memories? Sabo nodded at Dragon. Yeah. We became brothers after exchanging a cup of sake. Ace and Luffy are my brothers. Dragon widened his eyes at this but recomposed himself. Brothers, I see you would like to reunite with them. Yes, Sabo nodded at that. Yeah. They should be around. This is Landon of our men who was also an ally of Whitebeard's was there. You can see if any one of them is still on that island. Sabo bowed at Dragon. Thank you. No problem, go reunite with your brothers. Yeah. Yes, but before he could leave though also Sabo. What's wrong? Sabo asked. Take care of my son and tell him I said hello for me, would you? Dragon smiled softly at Sabo who returned it with his own. Yeah. After Sabo left, Dragon frowned a bit, he couldn't forget about them, Luffy's other side of the family. He always kept wondering if he made the right choice or not. Flashback years ago, Luffy's birth. Dragon was outside the castle of his ex-wife Big Mom, after he got her pregnant, she divorced and kicked him out. Damn old man, I always thought you were screwing with me on how babies were born. She told me to go with her assistant and do something in a tube and she would be pregnant. It wasn't called, it was insemination. That's how babies are actually born. Well, I think anyway, he shrugged off before focusing on my objective. I have to get Luffy away from here, Dragon muttered to himself. Big Mom would raise him to be used as another tool like the rest of her children. When he got the divorce, he had stuck around and sneaked around the castle and noticed how strict her children were. Linlin had sometimes even insulted her own flesh and blood, who would look saddened or were going to cry at any moment, and if they did their mother would tell them to shut up or go away. She always seems obsessed about unifying different races. It was probably the reason why she had so many children of different races. She had several husbands that were like him, even though they were her children. It seemed like she saw them as hers to control and demand, as if they were puppets or soldiers to her. He didn't want Luffy to suffer such a fate. So, on the day of his birth, he would come in by the window to the nursery, grab his child and get the heck out of Dodge before they could notice him. He was standing directly underneath a window of the nursery, with observation Haki. He had noticed two souls up there, both seemingly very young as if they had been recently born. Must be Yuan. Big Mom had given birth to Yuan and told Dragon that she had been already pregnant by the time Dragon also got her pregnant. Something about having vitro fertilizing where they would inject sperm inside her uterine cavity to fertilize an egg or something. How did that old man mess up explaining human reproduction that badly? He put his hood up to hide his face and climbed up to the window and saw Luffy in his crib, entering the room, picking up and cradling him, and he smiled when he saw his face. He sure is adorable. And that's when he saw him open his eyes and started to panic a bit. He tried to give his kindest smile at him when the newborn looked at him scared. He cried when he saw his smile. Shit. He immediately said reassuring things and sang him a nursery rhyme which seemed to calm him down. He let out a breath of relief. Thanking God, hopefully that didn't. Creak. Burly had entered the room staring at Dragon, wide-eyed in shock. Alert anyone? Well shit. Hey. Dragon quickly went up to Burly and knocked her out by a chop to her neck when she started screaming. He had to go now, who knows who might have heard her scream. He went up to the window and just as he was about to leave, he heard gasp behind him. There standing in front of the door were all the Charlotte siblings staring at him in shock and were frozen in place. What surprised him though was Big Mom standing behind all her children. She looked stunned, frozen and afraid. Was she worried about their child? Dragon was confused. He saw how she would look at Yuan, muttering how he was gonna be a wonderful tool or things like that. She seemed uncaring, so far to look fearful. No, can't be, she's just afraid of losing another tool, and when thunder struck. He disappeared. Flashback end. I wonder, was she actually concerned about Luffy? Was she afraid of the loss of her newborn when she didn't seem to care about her other children's well-being? Did I make the right choice that night? Were some of the things Dragon muttered? Only time will tell. At the place where Whitebeard was buried. After a while, Boa Hancock's ship arrived with Rayleigh on board on the island. The Whitebeard commanders were wondering what Roger's first mate wanted. Yo Rayleigh. Luffy smiled when he noticed who it was. Nice to see you again, Luffy. Rayleigh smiled back, waving at him. Ace's brother, you know that man? Marco asked in surprise. Yeah, we met in Sabati in a bar. He helped with coding my ship. So, what are you doing here, Rayleigh? Rayleigh turned serious. Do you know where your crewmates are? Luffy also turned serious. No, are they alive? Rayleigh nodded at that. Yeah, Kuma sent all of you to different locations so that you could escape. Right now they are in the right places to train. Luffy tilted his head at that. Train? Kuma was helping us. Yeah, as your strength stands you could probably take on anything the new world sends at you, but how about your crew? Your crew was defeated with ease against Kuma, right? Luffy frowned at that. He had a point about his crew, but he also needed to train. The only reason he couldn't react in time was being caught off guard, and he was the first person to go by Kuma. Even though he was pretty strong, he needed to train his observation Haki to avoid something like this from happening again. He started thinking. He only unlocked Haki due to his insane Jiji's training, but even then, it took years for him to fully master both armament and conquerors. His observation Haki was pretty weak, and for his crew to gather strength and maybe even Haki, so for the length of the training he decided. Rayleigh, do you mind training me on observation Haki? It's not exactly my strongest. Luffy rubbed his head sheepishly, while Rayleigh agreed. So, for your crew. They are in the best place for training, right? Rayleigh nodded at this. The Earths will meet up again in years. Ace was surprised at this. Years? You sure, Lou? Luffy turned to Ace. For this, yeah, years after that we will meet up at the Sabati to set sail. Luffy looked at Rayleigh. Where will I train? Amazon Lily. Alright. Luffy turned towards Ace and his ship. Brothers, goodbye everyone, may we meet in the new world years or so. See you later. Ace's brother Marco waved off Luffy with a lazy smile. Stay safe, Luffy. Ace told Luffy, who pulled him into a hug. Yeah. Luffy-kun, do you mind if I accompany you? Jinbei asked Luffy. Luffy looked towards Rayleigh, who shrugged and looked back at Jinbei. Nodded at him. Sure. On board the ship, Rayleigh looked at Luffy. So what would you do? How will get the message across to them, Luffy-kun? Luffy smiled softly. Will go once more at Marineford. As they set sail to Amazon Lily, first to plan it all out, they went into action. At Marineford headquarters. The place had been wrecked heavily from Whitebeard but was under repairs. Several photographers had come to take pictures and write articles about it. Whitebeard's last words have inspired pirates from all around the world and are causing trouble. The Marines aren't able to catch a break, navigating from sea to sea, in order to suppress each uprising or any potential sparks to ignite more behavior. A Marine ship was sailing towards the docks, a photographer has noticed. Oh, would you look at that, here's a squad coming back from a mission. But the ship didn't enter the bay, which the Marines took notice immediately when it didn't follow basic protocols. What's that ship doing? It didn't enter the bay. What's it doing? The photographers also noticed something was off. They're acting strange. Bang. One of the cannons fired. Everyone had heard it and was scared of it, but nothing happened. Firing blanks. What the hell's going on? A high-ranking Marine had approached to see what's going on. Has that ship attempted to contact with us? He asked a Marine who was on site. No. The Marine had grabbed binoculars and was shocked when he saw who was on board. This is impossible. Why did he? What is it? It's Mugiwara. Luffy. What did you say? And indeed, he was standing there on the bow with his arms crossed. He hijacked a warship. Why now of all times? The high-rank Marine gave orders immediately. Send that warship to the bottom of the sea. Boom. Daijin Juijutsu Kairyu Ponzioi. A huge wall of water was raised up and blocked the cannonballs. The Marines were shocked. Beneath the waters Jinbei had come up and they noticed this is that the Sea Knight, Jinbei. There's another man. And there was a person sitting on the barrel with a handful of bullet pellets. They fired again, but he threw the bullets and exploded the cannonballs before they could reach the boat. The Marine had noticed his face and was shocked. No way is that the living legend, former first mate of the Roger Pirates. The Dark King, Silver's Rayleigh. The Marines and civilians alike were stunned and shocked. What the hell are those doing here? The Marines noticed something. They aren't approaching, they are circling around the entire island. It's like a funeral at sea. After circling around they entered the bay. The funeral did. They found out our forces aren't here right now, you miserable pirates. Launch a concentrated attack from all directions. Bang. All fortress cannons aimed and fired at the ship. They had hit and sunk the boat. There was nothing but smoke and pile of woods drifting in the sea. They were silent until an arm stretched out and out came Rayleigh, Jinbei and Luffy, who landed inside Marineford. Now go wild. Right. Luffy ran forward while the Marines were ordered to catch him, but Jinbei and Rayleigh had blocked them off. I will take you on. I think you will also have to entertain me as well. Gomu Gomu no. Luffy extended his leg and swept the Marines off his path whip. He was looking around the place searching for something. Reporters noticed and followed him. Where is he going to do? His heading west. So, he's not planning to destroy HQ. He kept running and knocking Marines out of the way until he approached a bell. The Ox Bell. What is he going to do with the Ox Bell? He jumped forward towards the bell, grabbing the giant rope attached to the bottom of the bell. He rang the bell. As he was ringing the bell, the people around the island had heard it and were stunned and frozen in place. After ringing 6 times, he turned, jumped down and walked off slowly. The reporters, stunned at first, immediately trailed behind him taking pictures of him. Marines tried to stop him. But they couldn't, they just couldn't swing or attack him, they were afraid. He approached a hole in the ground and took out a bunch of flowers and dropped it to the hole. He bowed his head, taking of his hat and putting on his hat. This was his silent prayer, his show of respect to those who lost their lives. Photographers noticed him posing and moved to a better position for a photo. This will make a great shot. And that's what they did, taking several photos of Luffy. This was his plan to send a message to his crew. Written on his right upper arm was the new date. He crossed out with Y uncrossed. After a giant fish appeared out of the ocean, he smiled. That was his cue to leave. He leaped and ran towards Jinbei and Rayleigh. After catching up to them, they leap off and escaped from Marineford. The reporter pretty much summed up the whole event. This is big news. As newspaper were printing and were spreading out, a certain fleet admiral was talking about his resignation. The newspaper has slowly been spreading throughout the world. It had reached Arabasta, Crocodile and several infamous pirates, including the Supernovas, Dayton and everyone who knows him. Meanwhile, on the Grand Line, Luffy was on Boa Hancock's ship, was heading for Amazon Lily to train. Sorry about this, you guys, for the long trip. I forced you to make this long journey. It's fine, we're used to long expeditions. What are you doing over there? We are keeping watch over you to make sure you're alright. It's an order from Hebahem-sama. Hebahem-sama got too excited earlier, so she collapsed. Right now, Luffy was lying on bed while the Kuja females were pulling on his skin in astonishment of how he could stretch. So, we are keeping close watch over you. Luffy stared far away while staring up. I wonder if they'll get the message. As long as they read the article, they should understand it. The key is that it is something you normally don't do. Rayleigh said casually while the Kuja women were also pulling skin along with Jinbei. Jinbei got irritated by this. Hey, will you stop that? There was one man who seemed rather dense, though. Well, I'm sure he will figure it out somehow. It should be understood by all of them. That's what I believe. Where the Straw Hats currently are. So that's it, Luffy, I got your message, I understand. Really, that's it, Chopper. I see, so that's how it is. Got it, Luffy. Robin. So that's what you meant, Luffy. Sanji. Roger that, I got it, Luffy. Usopp. I understand. She decided that all on his own without taking our feelings into account. Nami. I see, Frankie. Oh, is that so? I understand, Luffy. Sandbrook. The ruins of the Shikra Kingdom. Hey, get up, how long are you gonna stay asleep? How many times do you have to get beaten up before you're satisfied? Try to think about me too, forced to treat your wound over and over. Right now, Perona is scolding Zoro for fighting with Mihawk again. Nobody asked you to do that. Perona gasped at that. Oh, really? And here I brought you another newspaper from the news coup, too. Zoro perked up and was interested, and there's an update regarding your captain in it, too, and now she had his attention. What was that? He winced from standing up so suddenly. He was bruised and wounded from fighting Mihawk. What did you say? He demanded. Perona panicked a bit. Calm down, I said, calm down. After he did, she held it in front of him so he could read. Hey, have you read it yet? My hands are getting tired. Wait just a little longer, there must be something here. Luffy wouldn't do something like this. The fact that Rayleigh was with him means that it was his idea. I'm sure there's something here. Zoro knows his captain well, he was the first mate after all. When Mihawk told him how Luffy had freed Ace, he felt relief, but then shame and guilt. He wasn't there for the captain, but not only that, he was weak, they all were weak. They knew it when Luffy tried protecting them from the pacifista. When he took down the admirals and freed Ace, they needed to get stronger so he wouldn't need to protect them. Whatever, just hurry up, Perona shouted at him. Reading the newspaper, it shown how he was showing respect for the dead. This was something he never saw him do. It was out of the ordinary, there must have been meaning. Focusing on the picture of Luffy, he noticed the message. And knew what he had to do. Later. I beg you. Zoro had approached Mihawk, laid his 3 swords and bowed deeply towards him. Mihawk kept a poker face while Perona was gaping at him. Please, train me in the ways of the sword. Mihawk's eyes narrowed. I've misjudged you, Hirano. You ask your sworn enemy to teach you. You should be ashamed. Get out of my sight. I have no business with such a worthless man. It seems I overestimated you. Mihawk started to pour wine. What are you doing? You are only embarrassing yourself. Zoro gritted his teeth in frustration. I want to become stronger. You failed to defeat the baboons and couldn't go out of sea. Then you crawled back here. I have nothing to teach one such as you. Zoro started to bleed. I did defeat the baboons. This caused Mihawk to widen his eyes before compassing himself and looking at Zoro. He beat them. Now I just need to take your head, but I'm not so stupid to think I can beat you right now. Mihawk raised his eyes at him and questioned him. I don't understand, if you still see me as an enemy, why do you bow before me and ask to train you? For what purpose? Zoro raised his head and looked at Mihawk in his eyes with conviction. So that I can surpass you. Mihawk relaxed and laughed. So you want me to train a swordsman who wants to take my own head, he asked amused. What a strange man. Honestly, it's ridiculous and you're still disgracing yourself. It would seem that I have found a man truly filled with ambition. He commanded Perona. Oi, ghost girl. Tend to his wounds. Perona looked at him irritated. Hey, don't tell me what to do. The training will begin after your wounds have been treated. Zoro lit up at this. Well, Perona reluctantly bring him to his room while grumbling. What an awkward man. When someone like him disregards his pride, it must be for the sake of another. Then Zoro's room where he's currently staying. Perona opened the newspaper D with an X over it and why you're right, it's tattooed on Straw Hat's right arm. Zoro held up a piece of paper and explained, we made a promise to meet up in a certain place in days. And look at how it turns out. Perona thought so. D means days, but it's crossed out and the Y means years. Years. We won't meet in days, we will meet each other again in years. Everything else he did was a distraction to hide the real message from everyone else. This message was meant for us. It's the decision that Luffy made. There's no point in rushing, Luffy could take on the new world, but us we won't stand a chance there. Zoro narrowed his eyes as he continues on. We'll stop here and increase our strength. And then we'll set sail once more. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Psychotic-Tomato for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.